Bismillahirrahmanirrahim wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Peace and love, everybody. I'm Brother Ali. This is the Travelers Podcast. I don't have a guest this week. I actually have a couple conversations with guests recorded. So it's not that we don't have them, but I wanted to take some time to just sit and talk through and process this last stretch, this last run of episodes that we've had. Because I just don't want the intros and the outros to be too long on the actual episodes. And then usually after they drop, I go back and listen to them again. BK1 edits them and I punch through them, like I check them out. But a lot of times, week in and week out, I don't have the time to sit and really contemplate and think about and process the episodes while they're happening. But I want to take time to do that. I think it's really important to always debrief, decompress, to contextualize, to talk through things. I think that's really important. It's one of the things that I picked up from organizing, from activism and organizing, to always take time as a group to debrief and to reflect together and to process together. So when I'm on tour, one of the practices that I picked up was to have like bus meetings or van meetings where once a week we, on a long drive usually, will say, okay, we're going to everybody take out your AirPods, turn off the radio, turn off the TV, put your phone down. What's the Kendrick song? Turn off the Wi-Fi, take off the mask. We'll turn all that off. And we're just going to sit down and kick it. And we do it in a really specific way where everybody in the crew says what they loved about the past week. We try to do it every week. What did I love about the last week? What were my least favorite things about the past week, just as passage of time? Like, these are things that happened that I'm celebrating, I'm grateful for. These are things that happened that weren't my favorite. And then that person will talk about themselves and say, like, these are the things that I did this week that I feel really grateful for, I feel really proud about, I feel good about. These feel like achievements, accomplishments. And then these are the areas where I'm inviting myself to grow. We try not to frame it in terms of like positive and negative or, these are my compliments and these are my critiques, but like, these are the things I'm grateful for. These are the areas where I'm inviting myself to grow. And I'm also inviting the people around, that refining, and then each person goes around the crew, and for each other person in the crew, they say, these are the things that I saw you do that were really dope. And then this is the opportunity to say, like, you did this thing for me, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate that, whether it was directly for me or for somebody else, So sometimes they'll be like, hey, the other day I was having a rough day and you grabbed me coffee, and I just want you to know that meant a lot to me in that moment. So I really appreciate that. And then also we give each person gives each other person something to think about, something to consider, an area where they might want to offer an opportunity to grow or to reflect or to refine. It's important for a lot of reasons. And one of the things is that, and you have to say something about everybody. So there were times we were on tour and it's like, people on tour have these relationships where sometimes you're just really feeling somebody on the tour. And then other times you're really not feeling somebody else on the tour. It's just part of group dynamics, part of human condition when we get together. And also the nature of tour. Like, tour is hard. Tour is really very, very difficult. It seems glamorous, and there are different levels of glamour that do come along with it. There's parts of it, times, like, man, tour can be super dope, but it's also a grind. And even if you're rich and famous, I mean, even for Jay-Z and Tyler, the Creator, and Beyonce or whoever, like, even if you're enormous, tour is just a grind. There's this clip that I posted online because it was Michael Jackson saying, I hate touring. He's like, I hate it. I'm tired. And this is Michael Jackson. This is like the biggest artist that ever lived. And man, and he was talking about it. It was real talk. You say you travel, first of all, you're in different time zones all the time. When you get done with a show, you have so much adrenaline going through you that these massive changes that you just get thrust in and out of, that you spend all day sitting around or, doing physical labor or logistical stuff, and you're just sitting there. And, because you got the travel part. So if you travel in a van, which is what I do most of the time, I'm right below the level of like income where a bus makes sense. So a bus costs around $1,000 to $2,000 a day for a bus. To rent the bus, you got to pay for all the fuel, you got to pay for the insurance, you got to pay the driver, you got to get the driver their own hotel room. The driver gets a food stipend, all this kind of stuff. And then parking is crazy. So I'm saying it's $2,000 a day just to have the bus. And I just can't afford that for most of my tours. I've been on tours where we had buses, but for most of the tours that I've been on, it's a Sprinter van, which is still expensive and it's still nice. Like that Mercedes bus van that is big, and they have different arrangements and configurations. So like a lot of times we get one that has like leather captain's chairs. It's got USBs. It's got a TV. Even though I'm anti-TV. Like I do not like TV. I don't like movies. I don't like it just being on. You know what I'm saying? It's not that I never watch anything, but I usually watch the same things over and over again. Like I got like 10 movies that I love, and I got a few TV series that I watch, and that's all I watch. If I watch anything, it's going to be stand-up comedy or like lectures. Like I love Islamic lectures and things about history and things like that, documentaries sometimes. But man, I'm very anti-TV. But they do have like TV screens and things like that, and I understand. I get why people love it, and I get why people love gaming, but I can't do it. I'm just like, man, if I get into that, I know how much I care about. I'd rather put that into cooking or coffee or learning something or something that energy. I'd rather put it into something that I can share or offer to somebody else. So I get all that, but I'm not into it. So we be in the van, and it's so long. So if you're in a bus, the drive is usually at night while you're sleeping. So after the show gets over, there's usually a little bit of time for the crew to load the stuff onto the bus, to break down all the equipment, settle out the business for the show. So the show maybe gets over at midnight, and then, van call or bus call would be like 2 a.m. So there's like a 2-hour window for everybody to do all the stuff they need. And then there'll be 1 or 2 hotel rooms. So if you want to go shower, you can do that. Then you come and you get on the bus and you drive from like 2 or 3 in the morning until 10 in the morning or however long the drive is. So you're sleeping during that time and you wake up, you're in the next city. It's dope being on a bus. Like it's way better being on a bus. If anybody that says it's not, I don't know. But the van has certain charm to it as well. But when you're on a bus, you sleep during the drive and you wake up and you're in the next city, and then you've got a full day. So when, Slug and Ant are going and record shopping and things like that, and, Ant will walk. Like me and Ant are both on this like intermittent fasting, a lot of walking. Me and him are on a similar kind of thing. And it seems like Slug is on it too. If you've seen the like videos of the new Atmosphere tour, they all look great. You know what I mean? Like Slug looks great, Ant looks great. Bill is always fit. But it's dope, So you got all day to just go and do whatever you want. Like your day is yours. And you go and there's a hotel room. There's like, they call them day rooms that are just for everybody. You go in there, shower and get it together and stuff. And then you got a whole day. When we're in the van, we wake up in the morning, and in my crew, we go to Whole Foods. You get your food for the day. That's what I encourage people to do, is like get your food for the day. If you want to eat pizza, get the Whole Foods pizza. I know it's going to be more expensive, but so we get our food for the day. And then we drive. And so you're in the van from, 3 to 6 hours. Sometimes it's mega long. And then you get to the city, check in the hotel, and then the crew guys go to the venue and they start setting up almost immediately. A lot of times they're just throwing their bags in a room. They go straight and they start setting up. And then the artists get a little bit of time to rest maybe. Because for us, there's a very physical element to that. And so, so we spend the whole day driving. And then maybe you get a little bit of rest, and then you go do sound check and things like that. So you're sitting and physical work and all of that kind of stuff. And we usually do VIP, which I love because I get to be with people and, go do the VIP, do the sound check, all that kind of stuff. And then usually I'll eat. I like to eat several hours before I get on stage. I like to get on stage with an empty stomach. It's not a good thing for me to have food in my stomach. Also, for my body, what I'm learning is it's just best for me to eat once a day. Like my body, that's just the best. I think it's a really good way to live in general. But for me, eating one meal a day is just what's best. And, I find that once I get used to that, it's the best way for me personally to live. And then during the day, I just drink water and some coffee, and that's it. So man, then you go and you go from being alone with your tour crew to jumping on stage, and then for an hour and a half, however long you're on stage, it's so much electrifying energy that no matter how it goes, like it's almost impossible to go to sleep after that. And so then after the show, you go back to the hotel, take a shower. My family is in Istanbul. So for me, after a show, I can call my family and FaceTime with them and stuff. Usually like I'm touring in America. And then it's like you're not going to sleep immediately after that. And that's the time that's the biggest struggle for most touring musicians. That's the time when people do drugs. That's the time when people try to hook up, with their fans. That's the time when people overeat. That's the time when people buy stuff. That's the time when a lot of times that energy is like, what do I do with all of this? Because for most of us, unless you go out and party, and for the people that go out and party, that's why they do it. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. I'm going to pause. I don't know if you can hear the adhan. They're calling the call for prayer, so I'm going to just pause for a second. All right, I'm back. They call the adhan, the call for prayer. A human being gets up in 1,000 mosques across the city of Istanbul and does the call for prayer and like operatic level performance 5 times a day. So 5,000 calls to prayer just in the city of Istanbul alone, and they're all human beings doing it. Like it's all a person doing that. Just that phenomenon alone is so amazing. Like if you think about anywhere, hundreds and hundreds of people delivering a performance like that in any city, every single day, day in and day out, 5 times throughout the day. Like, what does that do to your heart? And my family and I, it's time for us to apply for another year living here. So if you're a person that prays, please pray for us. And if you're a person that wishes others well, then wish us well. And if you're a hater, then may we be protected from you. Because that's true. It's true. There are people that wish others ill. That's a very, very common thing too. What I was talking about though, before the call for prayer was that, that's the time of day, like at the end, after the show, that's really challenging. That's a time when it's a really strange journey to be on, from going from that huge time of being in front of people. Even if you're only in front of a small handful of people that are listening to you and that you're controlling the energy in the room, it's a tremendous feeling that can be really hard to come back. My friend, the comedian Azhar Usman, he's the comedy whisperer, and he's an advisor to a lot of comedians, along with being a really dope comedian on his own. But he always is like, yeah, you're like, right after getting off stage, he was saying that he loves to see people and engage people and interact with them during that time. Because he's like, I want to watch the Hulk turn back into David Banner. He's like, everybody does it differently. And I'm a person that, sometimes in therapy, they call it dissociating. But I'm a person that when I get off stage, it's very clear to me. So I'm relating to the creator more and more and more on stage. I think I always have on different levels, but especially in the last 5 years or so, it's been very clear to me before I get on stage, while I'm on stage, after I get off stage, that that's something that I was blessed and able and being given the gift to take part in, but I'm not the one that did that. I was part of that experience, and but that was the creator doing what the creator does, and all of us were relating to it, you know. And so when I step off stage, it's like there's a verse in the Quran that says, "Wa ufawwidu amri ila Allah, inna Allah basiran bil ibad." That certainly I turn my affair over to Allah, and Allah knows the best, has total basira, or like can see the inner realities and all of the dimensions, all of the layers of the servants. And so it's like, man, I turn this over to the creator, the good of it, the bad of it, you know. And I ask that it's only good. But that's a challenging time for a lot of people. And that's what Michael Jackson was talking about, is that even the people that have the biggest, most successful careers, that's really challenging. And then, you know, the next day it's like you expect it to have a normal day and to just keep on traveling and to just, you know, and then also you're dealing with your physical health. And it's a big thing to be around that many people. And especially if they're expecting to shake hands and give hugs and talk up close and all this kind of stuff, to just be exposed to that much of people and their germs and their, you know, and their hearts. So like energetically is one thing, but then also the physical part of it is another thing. To be touched, to be physically touched by that many people is a lot for somebody to undergo. It's a lot for our system to go through. You know, they talk in therapy and somatic therapy. I was in somatic therapy with my son, and he was talking about with Resmaa Menakem, one of my favorite people, one of my favorite public, you know, intellectuals, and also one of my favorite episodes of this podcast is with Resmaa Menakem. And he did therapy with me and my son. And so he would talk with my son about some of the things that he had been through, and he would just ask him, what would it feel like for your dad to put his hand on your back right now? Like just even the thought of that, what does that do? You know, and then he would talk through like what that was like. And so sometimes we would get to the point where I would put my hand on his back, but sometimes it was like just even thinking about that was enough. And there's a lot of power in being touched by another person. There's a physical change that happens physiologically and psychologically when we're looked at, when we're listened to, when we're spoken to, when we're touched. And to go through all of that, like our mind and our body, our physical system, our nervous system is going through something. We go through that. So just being touched by that many people and being exposed to all that energy and all those germs and all that stuff, you know, it's a trip. It's a trip. And so that time after the show is incredible. I always go on these tangents, but hopefully I can always remember how to get back. So the reason that I was bringing this up is because on tour, we're going through all of this stuff and we have these check-ins so that we can process together. And it's really important to do. And it also creates a situation where, you know, anything that's challenging or frustrating during the week, whether it's with myself or just with the kind of culture that the tour is taking on or with a particular individual, I know that I'm going to have an opportunity to voice that in a way that's constructive, that's healthy, you know, that's productive. So it makes it easier to, I don't believe in letting stuff slide. Like, I don't think that's a real thing. It goes somewhere. You know what I'm saying? So if somebody does something that I don't like, and it's part of being in a crew, being in a family, being on tour, working together, a dynamic, you need to be able to process this stuff. And so if you know that there's a real opportunity coming up, it makes it a lot easier to say like, okay, I can delay this conversation until we're in this opportunity where we're going to be able to voice it in this way. So it really allows for that. And so any challenges that people are having with each other, and also we start to see trends too, you know, like we start to realize like, okay, when it comes to me, people are constantly bringing up this particular thing. And it gives an opportunity for me to address that and just hear it and listen, you know. So that's a beautiful part of it. But then also the dynamic where we're on a tour and it's Brother Ali is on tour, and everybody in this van, you know, in this work environment, we're all here because it says Brother Ali on the ticket. It says Brother Ali on the marquee. It says Brother Ali on the poster. Like, that's what everybody is here to do. So there is this dynamic where this thing needs to be my artistic vision. When the fans are coming to this show, this is a 20-year relationship that I have with some of these people. And so I need to make good on that. I need to make sure that what's going on in this situation is honoring the relationship that I have as a creative person and as a voice, with these people. So there's some people would talk about a power dynamic, but this gives every single person the opportunity to voice to me the ways that I might be doing something challenging for them, and this thing just came up with Lizzo, where some people that used to be in her touring crew were voicing some stuff publicly, and I'm never here to comment on that type of thing, but I will say that it's a beautiful thing that I picked up from organizing, from community organizing. And there's a difference between activism and organizing. Activism is when you go out and do the demonstrations and the talking, and all that stuff is really important. But organizing is when you get people together to work in an organized way around these issues. And you have to really practice some interpersonal stuff. And I recommend that for whatever you believe in, for whatever causes mean something to you. Get with some other people and organize around them, because there's a really healing process that happens there when you start to do community around anything. And it's one of the things that our spiritual teachers always tell us too, is get together with other people that are on this path and just be with them. It brings about a lot. It brings about a lot of healing, but it also brings to the fore a lot of the challenges that we're having, a lot of times spiritual teachers will have a certain method of discipline, because what they're trying to do is help us refine ourselves and to polish our hearts and to help us understand what's going on inside of us. We can have an outward practice, but that outward practice is reflective of an inner reality. And that inner reality is what we're actually trying to perfect. The outward practice is important for doing that, though. And so our teachers, most spiritual teachers, especially historically, they would give you certain things that they would call tarbiyah, which is like a type of training. They would give you spiritual training, and that training gives you discipline. And so they would be with you on a daily basis, and they would give you certain things to do, certain tasks to do. And those tasks would help to discipline our ego and to refine our core and to help us become strong spiritually. So our teachers, one of them lives in the Gambia, one of them, the other ones live in different places around the world and they travel and stuff. So we're not in a situation where we're with our teachers every single day. I have a really beautiful privilege of being able to communicate with one of my primary teachers on almost a daily basis. And so that's a really beautiful thing, but that's not the case for everybody. And so what they say is get together with other people that are on this path and just spend time together. You can try to do projects together. You can do service projects together. You can just come together and just spend time together. But like even drinking coffee together, even drinking tea together, even eating cherries together is a spiritual practice. And it's very healing, but it also will bring about that type of thing, because when the people come together, we, get in sync with each other, but we also bump into each other. And that's part of the spiritual practice. That's part of the discipline of the soul. It's part of the education of the soul to be together. And so I believe in that too. It's really easy to get into all these opinions and these worldviews and political assessments of things, and you find people online where you can fall in with them. But I suggest to anybody, take that off of the screen and actually get in space with other people and start working on whatever it is that you believe is in the best interest of the community, of the society, of humanity. Start working on that stuff together, because that process of working on it together will be incredibly educational. It'll be incredibly healing, and it'll start to smooth out those kind of rough edges. It smooths that stuff out. I think it's really important. And I say all of that to bring the tangent back completely full circle. It's really important to process the things that happen and to give an opportunity to work through it. This is why we always talk about therapy, and I'll just take a quick second to shout out our sponsors, the first of which is the Zakat Foundation. Zakat Foundation is really dope. I talk about it all the time. They do humanitarian work around the world, and it's an organization that I find to be, they've just done things that I don't see in a lot of like global humanitarian organizations. For example, they sponsor a podcast where a rapper talks to everybody from therapists to other rappers to comedians to TV people to religious leaders. And sometimes I just sit down in my office studio like I'm doing right now and just kick it with you for however long we end up going. The fact that they sponsor this is indicative, and I think it's reflective of the fact that they understand that culture is a really important part of doing that work. It's not just about dropping off food in places, even though that's really important. You know what I'm saying? It's that Turkey and Syria just went through these earthquakes. I don't know what they're doing in Hawaii, but my guess would be that Zakat Foundation is either operating in Hawaii or they're assisting and helping some sort of network that's going on in Hawaii. And they're not just going to show up in any one place and just act like the experts, like they work with people on the ground. So Zakat Foundation is dope. Go to Zakat US on social media, ZAKAT, or zakat.org, and find something that they're doing and put some money on it, man. Really, just take a couple minutes and just put a few dollars on something, because they sponsor this podcast. They are one of the organizations that really keep us doing what we do. And then the other one that we talk about all the time is BetterHelp. And BetterHelp's an online therapy platform, and it's really dope, and I recommend it. And there are criticisms of BetterHelp. You know, when I first started hearing about them, I have a bunch of friends that are therapists, and I just reached out to them and asked them, and I got a mixed response. But my favorite one was from my wife, who's a therapist, was from her mentor, who said, look, yes, there are critiques of BetterHelp because you're not there physically with a person. You know, we have questions about the oversight. We have questions about, you know, what does it mean for this enormous kind of network of people who don't meet each other in the same room? You know, and it is a corporation, and corporations are there for profit. So what does that mean? Are they compensating people properly? You know, how do we make sure that all the ethics are always upheld? Things like that. So, you know, my wife's mentor was like, yo, we have real questions, and those things are not to be overlooked. But she said, the biggest challenge in the world of mental health is just opening the doors of access and encouraging people to do it. So she said, one of the things about BetterHelp is that it does really provide access to most people. And it's not cheap, you know, because of the fact that therapy requires years of training to be licensed and continuing education and all this kind of stuff. So those people are getting paid, and then also the administration around BetterHelp. So it's not cheap. You know, it's not like, it's not like a Netflix subscription or something. It's an investment. But she said this is opening the doors. And she said also the number of people that are talking about therapy on podcasts now because of BetterHelp is spreading the word about therapy. So she's like, anything that gets people to through the door of the door of therapy is a good thing, ultimately. And so that's what I believe. Also, I use BetterHelp. Like, I really use it. I'm actually between therapists right now, and I'm really looking forward to getting back into it. I got one more trip to America that I'm going to do, and then I'll go through the process again and turn my account back on. You can also like pause your account. If you know, like, I'm not going to be able to do therapy for the next month, you can actually pause your account, and they'll take a break from taking the money out of your bank account. So that's what I did. I really like it. So BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/travelers. If you use that, then we get some money, and also you get to get a discount. So it's dope. But the most important way that this show is sponsored is by the people. That's always been the name of the game for us. Like, that's really, as Dave Chappelle says, that's the hokey pokey. That's what it's all about. It's really about the people. And so if you go to brotherali.com/join, or just go to brotherali.com in general, I think we're overdue to update it. We'll talk to BK about updating the website. But if you go to brotherali.com, in the join section, you'll see the caravan. And if at the $5 level, we've got our own streaming service where we upload all kind of stuff. We're about to upload a talk that I gave in 2017, I want to say, in the Gambia, West Africa, the first time that I went there to visit our teacher. I was asked to address this gathering, this large gathering in the Gambia, West Africa, of seriously practicing Muslim elders, community members, and also teachers. And so when I was there, I was so overwhelmed by that experience. I reached out to the people in the hip hop community that I knew. And I was like, hey, I'm giving a talk to this community. I want to give them greetings on your behalf, because the reason that I'm here is because of hip hop culture and art. So I reached out to Black Thought, and I reached out to Mos Def and Kweli, and I reached out to Ghostface and all of these people, and Pasta News. And I'm like, yo, I want to give greetings on your behalf. Is that okay? And they're all like, yes, please do that. Please do that. And that might not mean something to everybody. Some people, that might not mean a lot to you. But to me and to the people that I'm speaking to, it does mean a lot. And so I gave a talk to them about the ways that, like, what hip hop actually means to us. And so that was a talk that I gave there. And so we're actually uploading, there's video of that talk that we're going to upload to that space. So we've got our own, like, kind of streaming service, and we add stuff to it on a regular basis. There's also a talk that I gave in a prison that we're going to add. There's rare and exclusive music and video and all of this stuff that we're constantly updating. And for $5 a month, you can access that. We also have a $25 a month joint, and then we have a $100 a month joint where there's a Slack channel where we communicate with each other. And I'm saying, the people in this Slack channel, it's really amazing. Like, we've got some very traditional practicing Muslims. I mean, we've got tattoo artists. We got we now have a nudist homie that's part of that group. It's really a trip. It's really a wide sampling of people from different parts of the country and from around the world. You know what I'm saying? We got a native homie, an Aboriginal homie from New Zealand. You know what I'm saying? It's a wide variety of people from across the country and around the world. And we have real community there. And it's a very beautiful thing. We do Zoom calls. Like, we just the other day hung out on Zoom for like 3 hours, just kicking it, talking about stuff. Talking about things that I really wouldn't talk about on the podcast. People asking about, talking about current events and giving our takes on things. So we talked about the Barbie movie, and we talked about people trying to cancel Lizzo, and we talked about the Taylor Swift concerts, and we talked about the 50th anniversary of hip hop stuff that's going on. These are things that I wouldn't talk about in public, because that's not my role. That's not my calling. But in a community kind of space, you know what I'm saying, where we're just talking through stuff, that's what we do. So go and check that out. And those are the people that have been rocking with us for decades. And those are the people that really keep this thing going. So we're appreciative of all of that. But I wanted to take some time in the name of processing and just talk about what this last run of podcast episodes has been like to me. And so starting with the conversations that we did with Ant in Minneapolis, that stuff costs money. You know what I'm saying? Like, to have people come out and film those and record them, and then BK has to go through and kind of reconstruct all that stuff, different cameras, the audio. I think he said that one was particularly one of the main challenges for BK editing this podcast, is that I wear a lot of, like, You can hear like this one isn't as noisy, but I don't like to be wrinkly. I don't wear t-shirts and hoodies and stuff like that very often. And I don't like my clothes to be wrinkled. I also don't like to have to iron all the time. And so I wear a lot of track jackets and things that are made in like a certain types of fabrics that also are really breathable and things like that. So they'd be like button-up shirts and things, but certain types of fabric, and that stuff is noisy. And so BK is always like, dude, your clothes are so noisy. But we did boom mics. So rather than sitting in front of like the typical podcast mic, the way that they chose to mic it was really good in terms of getting all of that stuff. And it also freed up Ant, because Ant is a really physical person when he talks. And so we got to see him not have to be tethered to a sitting in place, like stationary mic. He got to move all around, and that was really dope. But we recorded those episodes. We talked for over 3 hours. And honestly, they ran out of card space on the cameras. We could have talked for much longer, and we will do more. But when I started this podcast, one of the main things I wanted to do is just share the relationships, the conversations, and who these people actually are through my eyes. It's one of the main goals of this podcast. Like, we all mean different things to each other. And so I just wanted to show and share who these people are through my eyes. And so I'm so grateful that, you know, Ant, as the guy that's produced most of my music and Atmosphere's music, and he's had a huge hand and role in shaping what underground independent music has become, directly with us, also indirectly with the people that we inspired. He had a major role in developing that. And so to be able to sit with him in his basement and talk through stuff and just allow him to show who he is and, you know, the things that have meant something to him on a heart level. We didn't even get into a lot of the technicalities of how he makes music, how he approaches music. We talked a little bit about his early DJing, but it really is a talk about, on a heart level, why did he even care about music? What is it that music allows to communicate to one another? You know, that's one of the main goals. That's one of my main objectives, is to talk about what is art and what is music and what is culture and why is it important? You know, in the modern world, we've just commodified everything. And whether you call that capitalism or colonialism or modernism, postmodernism, these things have lost a lot of their meaning. You know, things have become objectified, and art and culture has become a buyable, sellable commodity that's turned into like a drug. You know, it's the same thing that's happened. It's no different than what's happened with food. I mean, look at what's happened with food in that industry, in the industrial complex around food. To when most people think about food, they do not think about things that are natural, that grow from the ground, that grow naturally. It's one of the things I love about living in Turkey is like you can't just get anything you want whenever you want it. Like the cherries here are amazing, and we're just now leaving, like cherry season is just going out. But you can't just get cherries year round. You got to wait for cherry season. But when cherry season comes, my God, man, it is glorious. Like there's nothing like natural Turkish cherries and apricots when they're in season, you know, and you can even get a good peach sometimes, you know what I'm saying? I love fruit. I'm big on fruit, but and my love for fruit has really just grown since I've been in Turkey, and realizing that the idea of just walking into a store in Minnesota in January and expecting that there's just going to be fresh peaches, fresh mangoes, fresh avocados. I mean, it's dope. Don't get me wrong. I love being able to get all that stuff. But it's like, what kind of unnatural stuff is happening to deliver this here? There's a lot being lost in terms of our relationship with the food that we eat. You know what I'm saying? So that when it rains, we're completely disconnected from like, oh man, it's raining. It's going to mess up my car. It's going to mess up my shoes. It's going to mess up my hair. It's slowing down my day and all this kind of stuff. But like when it rains, to understand that this has a direct impact on what's happening with the food that I'm going to be able to enjoy. Because I'm only going to eat food that's grown in my area and that's in season. And the way that the rain comes and the heat and the dryness and all of this stuff is impacting the food that I eat. The ways that we're intimate with each other. I happen to be of the opinion that porn and social media and all of this stuff is a poison. It's not to diss anybody. We've all had our own relationship with all of this stuff. It's impossible to live in the world and not have some kind of relationship with these things. So I'm not dissing a person. I'm saying as a phenomenon, the ways that this stuff has impacted our own natural relationship with our bodies and with lovemaking and with intimacy, it's poison. I believe that it's poison. So we go to a natural state where we're not consuming this stuff. And the ways that we start to relate to each other as we age also, our relationship with our own aging bodies and those of our lovers, our intimate companions, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot that's been lost. There's a lot that's been stolen from us. And there's a conversation about art and music that we have here that's really important to me and it's also important because for the Muslims, there's always been a conversation in Islam about how powerful music is. And there is a debate and a conversation that goes back to the early Muslims about which parts of music ought to be practiced and consumed. And now, recently there's this thing that people tend to believe, this like widespread idea that says music is haram or music is forbidden. And I'm sorry, that's just a tremendous oversimplification. Because you have to think about, well, what do you mean by music? This is a nuanced conversation. What's meant by music? And I guess to go off on another tangent, tangents on tangents. But to have that conversation is to say, first of all, that's a conversation within the realm of practice. So in Islam, we have theology, aqidah. This is the conversation around creed and, around theology. And then you also have the conversation around the outward practice. So that's like, what do we believe? And there are certain things that they'll say are creedal beliefs. So like in a creed are basically a certain scholar or set of scholars saying, these are the foundational beliefs. And if you believe these things, these are the people that we consider to be classical mainstream Islam. And to not believe these things mean that people have beliefs that we don't recognize as classical mainstream beliefs, but but not all the things that we believe are inside of that, because there are differences of opinion about how we understand certain realities. And so some things are foundational, and then other things there are like schools of thought around these different beliefs. And then also within practice, the majority of practice, some people say like 70% of the things that we do, all of the Muslim scholars believe in. And then this is like a separate area of study. So there's the things that we believe, the things that we do. And then also there's the whole study of the internal reality of the human being, the heart, the soul, the ego, the inclinations, the appetites, the self-deception. These are three main areas. So music falls in the category of outward practice, meaning that the things that a human being does get categorized in one of five major categories. So there are some things that are good, that are so good that they're obligations. And a person is, it's a violation to not do them. So, praying for the people who are obligated to pray, fasting for the people in situations that we're obligated to fast, charity and care for our families and things like that. There are certain things that are obligations. Then there are certain things that are good, but they're not obligations. They're just really good when we do them. We believe that if we do them sincerely, then we hope to be rewarded by God for them. But things that are just virtuous, they're not obligations. There's no risk of punishment. We're not in violation for not doing them. Then there are things that are morally neutral. Then there are things that are on the negative side of the spectrum, and they're considered disliked or even they're like hated. These are things that are off-putting to God and to righteous people, that these are things that are off-putting, but they're not forbidden, meaning that if we don't do them, we hope to be rewarded for sincerely avoiding them. But if we do them, there's no fear of punishment for them. And there's a lot of things that are that way, that like these things are actually detested. These things are actually, really disliked, but there's no punishment in them. There's no harm necessarily in doing them. And then there are things that are haram. And haram means that something is forbidden, meaning that to struggle against it, to not do it, we would hope to be rewarded for that if we're sincere. And then also to do it would mean being in violation. So we actually would be offensive and in violation of our relationship with the Creator to do those things. And so there are some people that just oversimplify and say, all music is haram. And that's an opinion that there's a lot of financial backing and political backing behind that opinion. The people who have been the ruling class in Saudi Arabia, for example, that's an opinion that they hold and have held. And so because of their political power and also because of their relationships, and also because of the money related to oil, they've been able to spread their particular view of Islam. And their view of it, that particular view of Islam doesn't recognize theological differences. It doesn't recognize differences in practice. And as a field of study and practice, it really also denies the spiritual practice. This is a particular view of Islam and version of Islam that really has only been in existence the way that it is now for the last couple hundred years. And that group of people was put in power and supported by the English and by the Americans. And so there's been a lot that's happened there, and they have promoted the idea that music is haram. And, certainly that's a scholarly opinion. And any scholarly opinion, if the scholar is themselves qualified and legitimate, then that is a scholarly legitimate opinion. So if somebody has that opinion, they have the right to have that opinion. But that's never been the consensus. What the scholars talked about is like, okay, they get into legalities. It's a legal system that we choose to practice because we don't live in countries, even in Istanbul. The legal system here is not based on Islam. And so it's something that we choose to practice or not. But within our within the religious and spiritual tradition, there's a code that we strive to uphold for ourselves and within our families and within communities, but it's not religious law. So when we say the Sharia, people have all this stuff about Sharia law. For us, the Sharia is first and foremost a way for us to understand the way that our scholars have classified different things that a person can do, say, look at, engage in, eat, So there's scholarly discussions about all of these different things. And so they would get into things like, well, what is music? Because they all agreed that poetry and to sing poetry in most cases, that there's nothing wrong with that. And even pre-Islamic Arab poetry, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, loved even poetry that didn't come from Muslims because he said there's a lot of wisdom in poetry and the people would sing their poetry. So the idea of poetry is really related to like songwriting and also being like a singer-songwriter or singing great songs and poems of the past, even if they're not part of our tradition. So they never disagreed on that. And then also the scholars seem to agree that playing the drum and singing along with a drum, that there's nothing wrong with that. Where they started to get into conversation was around instruments, and particularly certain types of instruments. So wind instruments, like flutes and trumpets and saxophones and things like wind instruments. And then also stringed instruments, which would be violins and guitars. And then there's a conversation also around a piano, because something like a piano, is it a percussion instrument or is it a string instrument? It's actually both. So a piano there's strings inside a piano that when you push on the keys, there's a mallet that actually hits the string. You know what I mean? So these are all scholarly conversations where some of the scholars say different things about them, but that's more complicated than just saying music is haram. And then there's got to be a whole other conversation around, well, what about synthesized music? And what about sampling recorded music? This is all stuff that the scholars talk about, you know. So this idea that music is just haram. But when most of the people that say, well, music is haram, they'll talk about, well, look at the music industry and look at what music promotes. Music is associated with all sorts of things that are dirty and immoral. Well, this is where this part of the conversation for me around spirituality, and also around, I think there's a conversation around spirituality that's tied in with art and culture, and really exploring, affirming, addressing, expressing, reminding, and for me, insisting on looking at art and culture as in its fuller picture, and not just what it's been reduced to in this terms of an industry. But there also is a racial dynamic, and there's a racial conversation going on there too, because most of American music and modern world music has been created by the class of people that were considered to be captives and servants and slaves and less than in the racial hierarchy. I mean, the African diaspora, first of all, in human history, were the first to sing and dance and play music. And also in modern times have been the people that have created the music that human beings have appreciated and spread all over the world. So all of that K-pop music is all based on black music, and country music is based on black music. And, you know, not that others haven't participated and contributed, because absolutely they have. Everybody, you know, art, culture, singing, dancing, poetry, all of this stuff, these are all related to the human soul and to the human body and to the human experience. So everyone that interacts with them brings something to the table just by virtue of the fact that I am a unique human being that's never existed before. So when I practice these art forms, I do contribute something to them. You know, and then if a person is really digging into their spirit and exploring themselves and sitting with themselves, as great artists do. So there's no doubt that Joni Mitchell added something to this thing. There's no doubt that Woody Guthrie, and, you know, we could go down a long list of people that have added something to art and culture and music. There's no question about that. Like, man, did Adele bring something to the table? Like, come on, absolutely. Did Everlast bring something to the table? No doubt, no question. Did Amy Winehouse contribute something? Like, man, you got to be dead to not realize and acknowledge and affirm that, you know. But this music is considered to be low, and it's relegated to being something low. Look at hip hop music before. We was talking about this 50th anniversary of hip hop, celebrating a 50th anniversary. And, you know, I think I've heard Crazy Legs. Hopefully Crazy Legs will come on the podcast soon. I've been talking to him about it. But Crazy Legs saying that, I mean, come on, there's not one event that is the beginning. It's not like hip hop didn't exist and then suddenly at this one party, now it suddenly exists. He's like, it's a cool narrative. It's fine. It's as good as any other way to look at it. And he put some framework around it. So he's like, yeah, that's fine. But I mean, there's not one particular time when hip hop started. But to say that, that hip hop, you look at the early days of hip hop, and there's all sorts of hip hop music, and there's all sorts of voices and personalities, and there's all sorts of messages, and there's all sorts of lyrical content. There are all sorts of sounds. You look at these early hip hop tours before the music industry got involved in a major way. These early hip hop tours would be Public Enemy and Big Daddy Kane and the Ghetto Boys and Ice-T and Heavy D. You got all of these different types of, happy rap, lyrical rap, political conscious rap. I mean, gangster rap, street music, all of this stuff together on the same bill, men and women. And like, look at the women at that time. It's a variety. It's a variety of them. So you have Queen Latifah at the same time as MC Lyte, at the same time as Sha Rock, at the same time as, and they come along, it's a spectrum of time as well. But there's a variety of body types. There's a variety of messages. There's a variety of voices. And then the music industry gets involved, and the music industry started realizing this stuff, if we focus on certain sounds and certain messages, certainly within the messaging, if we stick to violence, if we stick to sex, if we stick to crime, we can sell this stuff to everybody. And that's tied into a racial reality. So when the Muslim scholars and speakers, and not all of them are scholars. There's a difference between real scholars and speakers. Like, some people are speakers and they're not necessarily a scholar. But when they say that music is haram, and that's just a cut and paste answer across the board, I mean, first of all, that's never been consensus. But also, what a lot of them are talking about is based on the state of music that they are engaging. So it's important for me in a lot of different ways and for a lot of reasons to really talk about this culture and what it actually means. And so talking to someone like Ant, that's part of why it's so important to me, because art and music and culture, especially in the time that we live in, but it's always been this way, is part of how human beings relate to each other on a plane that supersedes the intellect. So human being is an ego. Like, we have an ego, but a human being is also an intellect, and a human being is a heart, and a human being is a soul and a spirit. So we disagree with each other a lot of times, and we're also a body. So, and then our political opinions and our worldview and our belief system and all that stuff sits at the level and operates at the level of intellect. So when we dialogue with each other, that's two intellects communicating with each other. And those intellects are also tied in with ego. And so you talk to somebody about their political beliefs, you talk to somebody even about your experience. We have all of this framing around that stuff that's a connection, or the confluence of the ego and the intellect. And that's one way to communicate with each other. That's what we're doing right now. That's part of what podcasts are. But what I'm seeking to do, and what art does, is it circumvents that. There is intellectual stuff going on. There's physical stuff going on. There's ego stuff going on, because it's a human being practicing and expressing it. It's coming through the human vessel, which is all those things. But there's a lot of other stuff going on there too. You know what I'm saying? So there's something spiritual happening on a heart level and on a spiritual level that's extremely important. If you read a paper, two of them, one is called Islam and the Cultural Imperative. This is, talking about Islam, and, Muslims are one of the communities that I come from and that I speak from and speak to. But even for the people that aren't Muslim, I mean, check that out, because what you'll see there is that for any in that paper is by my primary teacher, Dr. Omar Farouk Abdullah, who is making the case that whenever there's a movement or a new lifestyle or a new way of thinking and being that's coming in, it's imperative that that thing also influences culture, that culture is built around it. Resmaa Menakem talks about this with regard to white supremacy. He's like, white supremacists have culture. They've got songs, they've got outfits, they've got all types of stuff. And that culture is what allows it to be bigger than just the meeting that they're in or just the organization that they're joining. You know what I'm saying? If you look at, like, why do white evangelical Christians, why will they vote just based on certain issues? Why will they all vote? That whole voting block will vote about abortion. Is it just because of abortion? No, it's because they have generations of culture that's been built around their religious and spiritual beliefs. And so for them, it's not just about abortion, but abortion is an issue that's directly related to the things that have given their lives meaning for generations. It's the songs that they've sung, the songs that they sing when they get married, when they die, the songs that the way that they process the pain of living life, the stress, the anxiety, the sadness. That's the way that they process all of the things that have happened on a heart level are expressed and processed through songs, through being together on Sunday for the main service. That when the organ gets played a certain way, or when a preacher says a certain thing, and when it's time to, do the spiritual and cultural practices together, all of the really tangible aspects of life are being understood and metabolized and processed through the lens and through in the workshop of this culture. And so for them, an issue like abortion is not just about abortion. It's about the greater kind of network that's been giving my life meaning. And so what Resmaa says and what Dr. Omar says about all of these things, these changes that we want to see, there's got to be culture built around it. And one of the things that Dr. Omar points out is that everywhere where Islam went, that it became successful and that it became a naturalized part of life for the people. It created a culture and it synthesized a culture that at the same time was very authentically Islamic, but then also very authentically rooted in the culture of that place. So he says Islam is like clear water that runs over different rocks. When it runs over rocks that are red, the water takes on the reddish hue of the rocks that it's running through. So Islam in China is very Chinese. Islam in West Africa is very West African. Islam in Turkey and Central Asia is very Turkish. And you see that all over the place. And so most of these societies, most of these civilizations of Islam are built around a cultural practice. You know what I'm saying? Where the Turks have theirs and the Senegalese have theirs and the Indonesians have theirs. It's a reality. But this is the case with all movements. And so the importance of being able to have this cultural language and meeting place for people to come together and access the life of meaning, especially in a time when people's religious practices are falling off across the board. There's less and less people practicing religion. Now, for the Muslims, the Islam is the one religion that's on an increase. And obviously I have my reasons for believing that, but even amongst Muslims, practice is down overall compared to how we used to be a few generations ago. And certainly where we were 200 years ago before industrialization and post-modernity and all this kind of stuff, colonialism, industrialized warfare and all this kind of stuff. Everybody is losing this to a certain degree. And so it's really important that we have a relationship, that we hold on to what art is really about, and not just what the industry says art is, not just what the industry says hip hop is, or music is, or art is, in general, in any of its iterations. But Culture is extremely important. So when I'm talking to Ant, that's one of the things that I love about it, is to really understand what does this mean to you. And so when Ant is talking about, he wanted the approval of his dad. He wanted to connect with his dad. It's the main focus of Ant's conversation is his dad. The approval, the acceptance, the validation, the love, the connection with his dad. I mean, there's so much tied in there that you may or may not hear in the record, but it's there, and it's really important, and it's really healing to be able to have those conversations and to be able to explore that meaning together. And then when he talks about Richard Pryor, so, for me, it's important to bring up the racial stuff with Ant. And Ant views himself and his family in a certain way where Ant identifies as white. And it's a really complicated and nuanced conversation. But, Ant's grandfather is black. His father is mixed, biracial, mixed race. And Ant says, my dad was a white guy, basically. And different people will see him differently. And so much of race is dependent on the way that you're understood, the way that you're seen. So, if people think you're white, you're white. If people don't see you as white, you're not white. And that's a whole other conversation that it's a tangent I would love to go into. But, so for Ant, there also is a whole thing there that people who are of mixed race origin, that's a whole thing that they navigate and that they have to deal with and that they have to work out and that they have to understand. And so you look at, those are also video episodes, so you can look at Ant. Now, a lot of people of color who understand that will look at Ant and be like, no, there's something else there. Like, this is not a Scandinavian white person. There's something else there. And certainly the reason why it was important for me to point out is because so much of how Ant views culture and music is based on the fact that whether or not he identifies as white or a person of color, it's really evident and clear that his worldview, his mannerisms, his way of speaking, his way of relating to stuff is informed by his family history and by the culture that he grew up in. So he also talks about Richard Pryor and how Richard Pryor meant so much because he got to see his dad and his dad's friends. And so, Ant will say brothers. So he means black men. He'd be like, yeah, these young brothers all sitting around talking, and that's his way of saying, like, he's with this group of probably mostly black men. And his father, you hear a lot in those conversations where his father was really rough around the edges, but he would see his dad with his friends listening to somebody and just listening to a recording of someone talking, Richard Pryor, and laughing and having joy, having collective joy based on a recording of a person they've never met talking, and how powerful that was. But then Ant goes on to hear that same person, Richard Pryor, start to talk about things that were sensitive. And he realized, also there's an acceptance there as well where Ant can, perform the music that his dad was exposing him to, and also listen and joke in the way that Richard Pryor was joking. And he talks about the fact that, I can't turn it off. I can't stop talking like Richard Pryor. Because for him, as young as he was, even in those early days, it's like, this is how you talk. And not only to be funny, but this is also the gateway into exploring your full humanity and your full manhood. So it's a really beautiful conversation. And then we go from that to talking to Freeway in Philly. And I talked about it a little bit in my social media and stuff, but I mean, Freeway is somebody that is just a monster on the mic. He's a ferocious, incredible MC. He's somebody that was so openly Muslim, visibly Muslim. That big Freeway beard is part of what inspired the resurgence of beards in black culture. And people say, well, like hipsters, hipsters have these manicure beards. Well, I mean, like most things in culture, Hipsters are people that pay particular attention to black culture and figure out a way to bring it into white culture. And it becomes a hipster thing. But Freeway was part of that resurgence of Rick Ross, the artist, the rapper Rick Ross, and LeBron James, and Drake, and all of these other people that in black culture that start rocking beards and start making beards a popular thing. That resurgence comes from Freeway in a lot of ways, and from Philly. And Philly is a city that is known for being a hotbed, a hub of Black Islam across the spectrum. And there is a spectrum of Black Islam. You start talking to Tone Trump, that's when you start to see that spectrum a little bit. So you have the whole history of the Nation of Islam, and then the community of Imam Warith Muhammad, and then Black Muslims in America taking on that very Saudi, what they call Salafi or Wahhabi approach to Islam that we talked about before. And that's the one that says music is haram, for example, and certain other ways of dressing and understanding and talking about Islam. And so, the insistence on wearing short pants, for example, like the pants being above the ankle, that's something that exists in Islam, but that's something that particular group really insists upon. They prioritize it. And also men wearing long beards. So Philly is like one of these places that's really unique, and that whole culture really is inspired by Freeway and by Philly in general. So being able to talk about that, but then also Freeway as just the beautiful human being that he is, and what he means to people. And I went into that conversation with Freeway with this whole idea that, I want people to see folks the way I see them. And so I had a version of Freeway's story that I was going to talk through. But Freeway's been through so much in the last year and some change. So a few years ago, he had kidney failure, and he was on dialysis, and he couldn't leave the area. And I mean, this is an artist that tours a lot, and he couldn't leave the area. He had to stay close because he had to get dialysis. There was a 25th anniversary for Rhymesayers that we did at the Target Center where the Timberwolves play. You know what I'm saying? Thousands of people, 10,000 people, I don't know the exact number, but something like 10,000 people came out there for that. You know what I mean? That was like a Drake show or something like that, but for underground Minneapolis hip hop music. And Freeway couldn't come. Like, it was kind of down to the wire because he had to stay close to his dialysis practice. And so he couldn't come be part of it, even though he was part of the musical legacy of the label. And so there was a long time where he was going through that. And then he got a kidney transplant, and he lost a lot of weight and got very healthy and became a spokesman for that whole thing. And then his son died. And then his daughter got diagnosed with cancer, and she died. And then his father had some sort of dementia, and he died. And I mean, this is stuff that Freeway went through. And Freeway is one of the most beloved and beautiful souls that you could find, even though he's so ferocious on the microphone. And I find that to be the case with street guys in general, and Philly more specifically, and Freeway more specifically, where, these people that are so ferocious in the street, if you catch them in a section of their life and personality, you can really just see how beautiful these guys are. And that's been my experience with so many people. Like, I know that side of Immortal Technique. I know that side of Ghostface. I know that side of Rakim. I knew that side of Doom. I knew that side of Sean Price. You know what I'm saying? I know that side of Freeway. And so, I had this idea that, like, I'm going to talk about his life. But then when we sat together, I realized, like, this is my real friend. This is my real brother. And I haven't had a chance to just kick it with him. So, like, we're just going to talk. And when that stuff comes up, we'll see what feels natural. But I'm not going to just go there so I can make content out of it. I want it to be natural. But I feel really confident that people get to see a side of Freeway that not everybody gets to see. Just how cool he is, how funny he is, how gentle he is, how funny he is, how loving he is, how, just he's just he can be really silly. But that's how these people are. You know what I'm saying? And that's a side of them that I've always, even before rap, have been blessed to see, because this is a community that embraced me and taught me and nurtured me. So that episode with Freeway is really special to me, and I'm really grateful that it exists. Then we talked to Ramy Youssef in our run of joints in Philly. Now that one was interesting because Ramy is somebody who has gotten a lot of accolades. Ramy went from being an up-and-coming, promising comedian to getting his own series, the Ramy Show on Hulu. And we talked a lot when he was just getting into that. So when I met Ramy's a young dude who looks up to me. I met Ramy and Hassan Minhaj around the same time. So he's looking up to me, looking up to Preacher Moss, looking up to, in some ways, Mo Amer and Ashar Usman, but they hadn't crossed over yet. So Mo Amer didn't have his Netflix specials yet, and he didn't have the Mo Show. And actually, Ramy's show is part of what opened the door for Mo's show, for the Mo Show on Netflix. So, we're talking, and I'm seeing him as like a young up-and-coming artist, and I just love this dude, and I'm seeing him, and he's developing, and I remember he went on late night TV, and he had some great performances and things like that. So it's like, this guy's coming up, him and Hassan Minhaj. And so when he started the show, we were just talking about it on the level of ideas. And he's like, man, I want to be vulnerable in a way that's going to be challenging for people. And, there's this whole added element of him in his unique position in the world, especially being able to make a TV show for Hulu, where he's like, man, people don't know what it's like being Arab in America. And I'm not even going to be talking about terrorism and the stereotypes, but just what it's like, to be a Muslim Arab growing up in New Jersey in the hip hop generation, and the relationship with Islam, that he's struggling to hold on to it all. And so we're just talking on the level of just being open and honest. And I mean, when I first came out, I didn't have that exact same position and experience, but it was similar. I came out in the early 2000s, and especially in 2007 when Uncle Sam Goddamn hit and all that kind of stuff, and I was on late night TV and all that, and playing on the main stage at the big festivals and all the biggest publications and all that stuff. I had my moment with the industry at that time. And I was very openly a Sunni Muslim and very, clear about that and proud about it. But I also was going through a moment in life where I was struggling with my practice. Like, I didn't have a community I was part of. And I went through a divorce with the Muslim wife that I had married in the community. And, I was saying a lot about the racial climate and all this stuff. So that was a really unique time for me. And I also was cursing a lot at that time. And there were Muslims that criticized me. And there's a family that I really love, and they publicly criticized me. And, it was like, well, what's up with all this cursing and stuff? And so I was working through all of that. So I was talking through it with Ramy when it was his turn to go through it. But we didn't talk about what that would actually mean for how things happen on the show. And I gave him ideas that I would love to see in a TV show. And all that stuff got filtered. And so also, when the show came out, Ramy got a lot of quick praise. He won a Best Actor award, and he really was being praised. He was something of an industry darling. He was I think he was on the cover of GQ. This guy was embraced and accepted and lauded in that industry. But the way that Islam shows up on the show was really confusing and troubling for people. And I'm one of those people. And I held back from talking to him about that for a lot of reasons. One, because since we talked about it at the level of ideas and intention, I knew that he was a bit apprehensive about it, And so I didn't want to I didn't want to be one of the voices just criticizing him, especially because I felt like he looked up to me. And also as an artist, I understand like, man, maybe it's just not for me. So being able to, you can hear some loud noises. This is around the time people are starting to head home in my office building here. But I just didn't want to be another voice of critique. But I think Rami knew, like you can tell from artist to artist, you know what I mean? So I would hit him up and I was happy to see him and happy to talk to him. And I was happy for his accolades. And I was happy for the acceptance and approval that he was getting from the industry. But I don't think I ever said to him, I mean, I wasn't like, yo, man, I love the show. I just kind of held back my opinions of the show. But as an artist, you know when somebody is just saying like, hey, I see you're out here moving around, you're doing stuff. But they don't tell you, yo, the album is dope. That's a specific comment that you either look for or don't look for. And as fellow artists, we know when somebody just loves us and when somebody actually appreciates the work we're doing. That's different. You know what I'm saying? Like, Yasin Bey and Black Thought, they know how I look up to them. And I know how they feel about me as a person and overall as an artist. You know what I'm saying? But I don't necessarily look for them to say like, oh, the new Brother Minister is dope. Although now with Yasin Bey, we communicate a little bit different. So now I can send him things when I'm working on it. And he actually sends me things sometimes that he's working on. So I'm privy to some Yasin Bey stuff that's coming up. And that's a little bit of a flex, maybe that's just my ego. But I say that to say, there's times where I know specifically if Yasin likes something, and there's times where I know either this was under his radar, or if I send it to him and he doesn't say anything, I am aware of that. There's a part of me as an artist that's like, oh, he didn't say he liked that. You know what I mean? So, and then I always wonder. So I think maybe when Rami came to talk, like he came from New York to Philly to be on the podcast. And then afterwards he drove back, and I didn't realize he was going to do that. He drove back to New York. So I'm like, man, maybe he came to have that conversation. And so there was some takeaways from that for me in the moment, in the moment when you're hearing somebody lay out their case. It's very powerful, and I'm really glad to be able to do it, Some of my, I would say my overall kind of feeling about the show is still there though, but it's enough that I did get some understanding about just what it's like for somebody to feel like they're in despair. And to be clear, I still haven't watched the third season. The second season was really troubling for me. There's a sheikh in the show. One of the things I told Rami is like, man, I would love for people to see these beautiful men in our religion, because you just never see that. There's the majority of people who aren't Muslim have no clue. Like, you just don't know anything about this, really, about Islam. And it's so beautiful, and I believe it's been kept from people. And so, I'm like, man, I would love for people to see the types of teachers and leaders and inspiration and mentors that we have in our community, because they're beautiful. I would love somebody to be able to see Imam Fahim Shuaib. I would love for people to be able to see what it's like to know Imam Zaid Shakir. I would love for people to know what it's like to know Dr. Omar Farouk Abdullah, and to know Hamza Yusuf, and to know, Imam Matthew Ramadan, and to know Aisha Prime, and to know Zainab Ismail, and to know these beautiful people, and to be close to them, and to be able to benefit from them. And I know that most people don't know folks like that. And then also, you never see them on TV. You never see a sane, rational, relevant, beautiful, supportive, loving, nurturing, caring, strong, religious figure in TV. You just never see that. You see Gandhi. You see these like iconic people that you can never be. You see Malcolm X. You see Gandhi. You see Martin Luther King. But like the way they're presented, I can never be them. But what about the ones that really live amongst us, that are still human, that still have to struggle against their ego, that still make mistakes, that still sometimes, come back and apologize for things that they did. You know what I'm saying? Or like this is what I want to see that. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that suggested that to Rami. But then he had Mahershala Ali, who's beautiful, and hopefully Mahershala will come on at some point, play this character that was like a sheikh. And then it's unclear when we talk later, like, well, was that a sheikh or was it just the student? That, the sheikhs have a representative, sometimes called a muqaddam, which is like, the person who kind of, the sheikh lives in wherever the sheikh lives, and maybe not everybody is going to be able to communicate with them directly all the time. So they have a muqaddam that, loves and serves people and kind of like is like a representative of the sheikh. And those people that's just another traveler on the path. You know what I mean? That person is really struggling along with the rest of us. It's just maybe they have a relationship, or some people find encouragement in this person, so they have something of a leadership role, but they're not the sheikh. And so it's unclear, like, is this person a sheikh? Are they just a representative? Like, what is this exactly? But this character comes on, and then you see Rami mistreat them over and over again. And then finally the sheikh, played by Mahershala Ali, curses Rami out and just says, I can't deal with you. Get away from me. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not how they are. These people, that I consider to be saintly people, and saintly doesn't mean that they're infallible and that they're above accountability. They're not. We don't believe that there's a living person that's above accountability and critique and that's infallible. We believe that the prophets are infallible. We believe that certain women in the history of this religion were perfect. We don't believe that there's perfect people living now, even the people that we consider to be saintly figures that are close to God. We don't believe they're infallible. But those people, they don't curse people out, even if you wrong them. They just don't. They're just not like that. And so seeing that particular twist hurt my feelings, because I'm like, that's not how our sheikhs are. Not the real ones, I've seen people wrong them. I mean, one of the great people that people draw a lot of inspiration from is Habib Omar bin Hafid in Yemen. Allah preserve him. I don't know him. I've never met him. But I mean, this person, they live in Yemen, and if I may be mistaken, and sometimes I'm caught up in the moment, and I'm not a scholar. I'm not a scholar, so I don't memorize details in the same way. And so sometimes when I'm telling stories, sometimes the details will be inaccurate, but the heart of the story is still there. And I don't claim to be a scholar. I don't claim to be that. But his parents were murdered. His parents were killed, and he forgave the people who killed his parents. There's a rapper, Muta Beale, who was part of Tupac's crew, the Outlaws. He went by Napoleon, and he lives in Saudi Arabia, and he's of the opinion that music is haram, and he doesn't do music anymore. And I don't know him super well. We've messaged each other, but he seems like a really very, very beautiful person. But he was kind of militant for a while about music being haram. Another one that's of that ilk is the former MC named Loon. And I've messaged him and he hasn't messaged me back. So I don't know if he's even aware of me, or maybe, I don't know. Who knows? We always try to have good opinions of people. He seems like a very sincere, beautiful guy. That's why I messaged him. But Muta Beale, formerly known as Napoleon from the Outlaws, he was in Tupac's crew. His parents were murdered when he was a kid in front of him. And then, he was in Tupac's crew. He made music with Tupac, released music with Tupac, and he became a Muslim. And there were some people in prison. He got a call that while he was in prison, that I believe, or maybe he was out, but through the prison network of guys that are inside, he got a call that, hey, one of the people that murdered your parents in front of you is my cellmate. And out of love and loyalty for you, I can take him out, like while he's sleeping. This person that was offering this already had life. He's like, man, I'm already doing life. We can get some retribution. Like, I will take out the person who murdered your parents in front of you when you were a child. And Mutabil Napoleon said, no, because, dude, this stuff is real. Like, these things are real. Like, you witness the beauty of a human being, and it's real. Like, this isn't a story. His parents were murdered in front of him as a child. He lived his whole life with his parents, never rubbing his head, never saying good job, he couldn't ask his parents about their family history. He can't get into his 40s and realize, like, oh, I do this because my dad did it, or to understand the family legacy. He didn't have that. That was stolen from him. His parents were murdered. The person who murdered his parents, he has the opportunity to make the decision, but because of Islam, because of his love for the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he says, no, it's better to forgive. You have the right to take vengeance. In Islam, you do have the right for justice. The Quran says it very clearly. The Prophet Muhammad says it very clearly, prayers and peace be upon him. You have the right to ask for justice, but it's better to forgive. And if you forgive and can honestly and truly forgive, then the doors of mercy are open to you in a bigger and stronger way. And so this brother, in utter sincerity, says, no, we're not taking retribution. I've forgiven those people. I might not need to, hold hands with them and skip down the street, but I'm forgiving them. And I pray that Allah forgives them. And in my heart, I hold no grudge towards them. And given the genuine and real opportunity, he says, no, we're not doing that. Let them be. Leave them alone. And now this is a saintly quality. This is a saintly quality. And our teachers, I've seen people harm them, wrong them, lie about them, slander them, backbite them. And I've seen people harm their children. One of my teacher's son and son-in-law was imprisoned unjustly. And they never took retribution. They never yelled. They never cursed. They never turned anybody away. And so to see that in the show where I'm like, okay, this is the opportunity to show what kind of people these are. And I know there's not only Muslims that have that, but it's a community where I've seen a lot of that, and I've seen a lot of that beauty. And I believe that Islam is the medicine for what ails us. And not everybody's going to agree with that. When Resmaa Menakem talks about embodied somatic abolition, I see that in Islam. All the stuff he's talking about is in Islam. I don't think he sees it that way, but I do. And the healing and the medicine and the wellness and the wholeness, I see that in Islam. And I want my people, and when I say my people, I mean everybody that I'm in community with. I've seen what that's done for black Muslims, and I've seen what it's done for a number of white converts. So black people have had like communal conversion since the 1930s, and even before that, even in the early 1900s with Noble Drew Ali, but definitely in the Nation of Islam, and definitely in the groups that came after the Nation of Islam. Communal conversion, I've seen what it's done. I've seen how it's reformed people. I've seen how it's caused healthy, loving, whole, well families and businesses and people and individuals. I've just seen it over and over and over again. And I've been part of it. And then I've seen white homies convert to Islam, and I've seen what it's done for them. You know what I'm saying? I've seen somebody that you would look at and be like, oh, this is a white girl. I've seen these white girls convert to Islam, and they don't stop being European American. But I've seen transformations happen in people's lives, communally, individually, as families. You know what I mean? I talk about my wife a lot. I've never told her full story because I just can't. But I've seen it. I've seen people who shouldn't even be alive based on the stuff that's happened to them They shouldn't be free. They shouldn't be sane. They shouldn't, and just the miracle that it takes to break one of these cycles. My wife shouldn't be alive. Like, she shouldn't even be here, much less sane, much less, again, it's not my place to talk about. But a lot of people live their entire lives hoping for and trying to have one of the miracles that happened in her life. And she's just overcome countless things that have ended the lives of people and have limited their ability to be whole. You know, I've seen it over and over and over again. And with a sincere person like that, you say that to someone like her, and she just automatically starts thinking of all the areas that she still wants to improve. And like, that's how sincere people become that way and stay that way. So it's like, yeah, Mel, preserve that in you. But also it's true, there's just countless miracles. I've just seen it too many times. And so, and I can't front, I didn't watch the third season. And it's really difficult for me to know that, like, this is what's being shown to people. But when I sat with Rami, it's like, I believe him. And that's important. It's important for him to hear from me, and it's important for me to hear from him. And the ability to share that is something that I really appreciate. Full disclosure, full transparency. I'm going to pause the recording and come back in a second. I have to go to my fly Turkish barber and get hooked up. So I'm going to go get hooked up, and then I'll continue this, inshallah, when I get back. All right, bismillah, I'm back. I was sitting in here talking about rain and how it affects the cherries and how much I love the cherries and the rain. And I went outside and got a haircut, and I came back and it was raining. And so I stopped and bought some cherries. So it seems like if we talk about something, there may be a correlation between it manifesting. So the rest of this episode is going to be about money. On the real though, alhamdulillah, I just went to my barber, which is a beautiful experience. You know, there are those that say that the term barber comes from Berber, which is related to a certain understanding of a peoplehood within Islamic civilization. And man, it's a beautiful experience to sit down, and there's just a lot of like care that is really part of the culture here. So like, you go to the Turkish bathhouse, and in the morning it's for ladies only, and then in the afternoon and evening it's for men only. So all of the people, all of the customers and all the workers is going to be gendered like that. And so you go in and you go in a sauna. You lay down on a hot like stone slab. There's a steam room. Some of them also have swimming pools, and some of them have a cold plunge that you can also do. That's a newer thing, but they have that as well. But you go in the sauna, and then you go and lay out on the like stone, and like a big Turkish dude, like you're wearing a towel, and a big Turkish dude wearing a towel comes over, and they have this like thing that produces a sheet of suds. It's soap, but it's also a moisturizer as well. And so they lay like a big sheet of water over you, of suds over you, and then they wash you, like they scrub you. They have these really intense gloves, and they scrub you, and like a layer of skin comes off your whole body. Like, you have no idea how dirty you are until you go into a Turkish bathhouse. And they clean you, and then if you want them to, they'll massage you. And I've gone to some upscale joints, like when some brothers came and visited, I went to like a fancy one. And it was cool, but there's something about going to the neighborhood joint, because you're in there with literally your neighbors, like people that are also at the bathhouse, that called a hammam. And then also the workers too are from your neighborhood. And it is something that's considered traditional and Islamic to go in there. And there's something about that sense of care and also touch that some people are weird about it. Some people, when they come around Muslim men, like traditional Islamic societies where, men touch each other and they hug each other and they kiss each other's hands and they kiss each other's cheeks and they kiss each other's heads. And sometimes with elders, we might kiss their feet. And I've had elders feed me with their hands. I've like sat at a table and had elders, put food in my mouth. and also been massaged and also done all of this stuff. And it's a beautiful experience, but sometimes it takes a little bit of getting used to. Like if you come from the West and you're not used to it, but it's very healing, and it's a powerful thing. And so when you go to the barber, it's not that intense, but it's something like that, you know. And the people, they cut your hair, they shave you, they wax certain parts of your face and forehead and stuff like that. They take a lighter and they light the hair on your ears. Part of it is theater too. Like there is a part of theatrics to the way they do all this stuff. But like they wax the hair on your nose, and if you want, they'll give you like a full, facial treatment, and massage. Like they massage your head and your neck, and like they'll massage your hands, and it's just a beautiful experience. And my barber in particular has been going through a thing where he had a baby son. They had a baby son about maybe a year ago, and he's been in and out of the hospital. And so he's gone for long periods of time, the barber. So sometimes we'll go in there and you might book an appointment with him, and it'll actually be his brother cutting your hair. And his brother's just a little different technique, you know what I'm saying, in terms of the actual cut. But he was there today, and I saw videos of the baby, and he speaks a little bit of English, and I speak almost no Turkish, just beyond the very basic things of how to take a cab, how to order food, how to explain the basics of me and my family to people, because they always have the same questions. But man, this guy's baby, this little boy and it's his first baby, so he's got problems with his lungs and he has problems swallowing, but man, they're fighting, and just seeing the baby come along. And he told me today he thinks the baby's going to come home in a month, inshallah. And so already, this is the guy that a lot of the Westerners in my neighborhood go to because he speaks English and he's really good, and he's a beautiful guy. And you wouldn't know how religious he is. A lot of people in Turkey are like that. You wouldn't know how religious they are because, he looks like he might be on his way to the club if you just were to see him. And sometimes you go up in there and they're playing music that would be played at the club, because a lot of times, they don't know what all the words are saying. They just know the energy of the song. But man, so I went in there. Sometimes I'll go in there on Fridays after the Friday prayer. And this guy, it'll take like a full hour after the Friday prayer for him to come through. And if there's nobody else in there, or sometimes if there's just a few people that they know are religious, they'll play religious music. And it's just really beautiful. A lot of times I go in there, he'll be fasting. And it's just a beautiful experience. So just came from the barber. But I'm sitting here reflecting on this past run of shows, of podcasts. I wanted to also say about Freeway that, Freeway, with everything that he's been through, Freeway is a deeply religious person. I know we were talking about Rami, but Freeway is a deeply religious person, and I'm glad for people to be able to see that, and just get a sense of that. With Rami, I was thinking about it a little bit more as I was walking to and from the barber. And, within a community and even between artists, if you can have these kind of conversations, they're so real that sometimes they sit on our spirit. But the types of back and forth exchange are really good because they give us a chance to see ourselves and our work through someone else's eyes. And it's important to hear the critique about us. And for me, it's important. I am a person with a lot of opinions, and I have deep opinions, and they're no joke. I try to not make this a podcast about just my personal opinions. I try to make them about timeless universals, because those are the things that really bring people together. I feel like if I'm going to have a platform, I want as much as possible to balance between speaking the things that I deeply know and believe to be true, but then also connecting with people and trying to unite people based on common humanity. And so even though, if you talk about, if I were to, I just mentioned that some of Lizzo's former dancers are speaking publicly about her. I know Lizzo. Lizzo comes out of the Minneapolis scene. She's from Houston, but she showed up in Minneapolis not really, with an interest in music, but not really knowing how to do it yet. And so one of my DJ Last Word and his crew, also the DJ for Atmospheres, Plain Old Bill, my DJ Last Word, and then two other DJs, had a DJ crew called Get Crifey. and they would play club music, but they would play it in a traditional hip hop style. So 4 DJs with 4 turntables playing vinyl a lot of the time, and really mixing, really cutting, really like high level hip hop DJing, turntablism, and mixing and things like that. But with Future and 2 Chainz and Rick Ross, and this was something that was really big around the early 2010s. So 2009, 10, 11, 12, maybe 13. They had like a strong 5-year run where they would sell out First Avenue as a DJ crew. And it was dope. And Lizzo is one of the people that I met through them. Like, she was coming around and she wanted to be an artist. And we just watched her work hard and develop, and her message and her image and her style and all that stuff. She didn't have that. Like, we saw her work hard for all that. So it would be easy to have a hot take, you know what I mean? And I also know people that have been canceled. I've also been in a scene of people where there's been a lot of like public conversation very similar to what she's got. And I have opinions, and but it's just like, man, what genuine good does that do? What genuine good does that do? What I've learned is that if there are concepts to be spoken about, I'd rather speak about them on the level of concept. Now, the problem is that doesn't get you algorithmic support, because the masses of people are not going to rush to that. And the platforms deal in tonnage. They deal in tonnage of time and attention. It doesn't matter what kind of attention. In their mind, there's no such thing as bad attention. All attention is, because they can sell it all as long as they have eyeballs. So if you're watching something you hate and you're disagreeing with it, doom scrolling, they call it. If you're watching something you hate and you're arguing with everybody and you're telling everybody how wrong it is, and you're on a campaign to get it taken down or to convince people of your opinion, all of that just feeds the machine. Like, the platforms are really happy about that. And so those are the type of things that they really reward. But I'm just not into that, you know what I'm saying? And so, it's not that I'm short on opinions, but in particular with Rami, I think it was really good for us to be able to have that conversation and to be able to have it in a way where the love between us is really clear. And honestly, that's where any conversation where you have different viewpoints, different vantage points, it can be really helpful, but it has to be predicated on love, respect, on a genuine care and concern, a genuine shared experience of humanity first, and then also whatever else we have in common, whether we're having a hip hop conversation or an Islam conversation or a political conversation. It's got to be based on, like, why are we talking to each other to begin with? Are we just trying to destroy each other? Are we peddling something? Or are we, because if we're having genuine conversations, those have to be based on, I'm talking to you in the first place because I love you, I value you, and not just because I'm trying to destroy you or beat you or use you as a foil for my, for me waxing philosophical about whatever is going to get me likes, shares, and tonnage of views and attention. So in that sense, I'm happy with the way that one came out. And many of the concerns that I have, I still have them. And I could also say that there are even some things that I'm realizing since the conversation that have really sat with me. I mean, I've always known that there is a big difference between the experience and the communities of, in the 90s, the way we said it was indigenous Muslims, or Muslims who are historically from America. So basically African-American Muslims, Black American Muslims, who had a big communal conversion, and there was big whole communities of African-American Muslims. That experience is very different from what we used to say was immigrant Muslims and indigenous Muslims. And for a lot of the Muslims that convert and that come from communities that have been Muslim for maybe a generation or two, or now we have 3 or 4 generations of Black American Muslims. And in the last 10 or so years, there's been an influx of Puerto Rican Muslims and white Muslims and Mexican Muslims, so that the community is growing. But that experience is really different. And a lot of times, especially the Black American Muslim community, is really not recognized, not accepted, not embraced, not even treated like part of the Muslim community. Its leaders are treated like they're second class. The teachers and scholars are treated like they're not legitimate. The communities and the things that they've produced and created and the doors that they've opened. I mean, the truth is that the first Muslims on the shores of what's now called America came from West Africa before Columbus and before slavery and before colonialism. That there were West African Muslims there's overwhelming evidence that a lot of ships came from West Africa, because those same routes, that the same currents that carried slave ships carried ships before that. And so there were Muslims in the Americas from West Africa. And then also during the slave trade, it's really hard to say how many of the people were actually Muslim, because not all of them were properly identified. But some say 30%. I mean, I've heard people say 50%. But I mean, a great deal, a large number of the human beings that were enslaved and brought to the Americas were Muslim. And then also, the very early, so the first prayers and the first Quran being recited, and the first marriages and the first teaching and things like that, and learning and studying, were among West Africans before and during slavery in America. And then also the first group of people to really have a mass conversion to Islam, or maybe we could say a return to Islam, were African Americans as well. And you think about the fact that from the early 1900s, the teens, when Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple were doing their thing, started doing their thing, up until 1975, you had this big, so all through the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you had all of this entire community of people that were identifying as Muslim, and they didn't have teachers, they didn't have people that necessarily came from overseas to teach them. These are people without a whole lot of even Western education, and they longed for Islam, and they did everything they could to learn. And they also built thriving communities. So mosques all over the country. The Nation of Islam in particular had the largest non-mainstream newspaper in circulation in America in the 60s and 70s. And they also had farmland, and they had a chain of grocery stores called Your Muslim Grocer Stores, called Your Muslim Grocer, and Salam. And they had a chain of restaurants, and they had a chain of dry cleaners, and they had a chain of private schools called Muhammad's University of Islam, and then later Clara Muhammad Schools. An entire school system, like a Black-owned, operated Muslim school system on American soil. So all these things existed. And then you had also, a built-in security unit, like the FOI, the Fruit of Islam, was a security unit where men were taught basic self-defense. They drilled like military outfits. They wore certain uniforms and things like that, and do amazing security. Like if you've ever been to a real kind of authentic like hood hip hop event, and you see security with brothers in suits and bow ties, that's the Nation of Islam. That's the Fruit of Islam. And you'll see them guarding Jay-Z, and you'll see them guarding everybody. And I've had the FOI guard me and do security at my events and things like that. It's really dope. It's a very, very beautiful experience to actually have people from the community do security like that, because you really feel safe. You know what I'm saying? Very different from a lot of times what they call, security or officers or whatever. And so this entire community and network existed nationwide when people came from other countries. And these are people that were longing for Islam. These are people who are changing their name to Muhammad and Kareem and, Najla and all of these beautiful Muslim names, who are changing their names. And a lot of times, like Muhammad Ali, for example, people wouldn't call them and wouldn't respect those names, and would try to call them by their former slave names and things like this. and people were really fighting hard, and they resisted the draft. I mean, a large number, before any white hippies resisted the draft in Vietnam, the Black American Muslims were resisting the draft as early as World War II and Korea, and Muslims went to jail. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad went to jail for resisting the draft. Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, the same. You know, Muhammad Ali wasn't the only one that resisted the draft and was threatened. You know, a lot of people went to prison for being conscientious objectors. And so this entire community and network, powerful network of people were existing in America. And then folks came from Pakistan and Egypt and other places, and not to single anybody out, but people came after having been colonized, after having their resources stolen and their political situations destabilized, and all sorts of things that colonialism did the same things. White supremacy did the same things in different forms in those parts of the world. And people came to America and for looking for a better life. And a lot of people named Muhammad changed their name to Mo. And a lot of people named Kareem changed their name to Kevin. And a lot of people named Rahman changed their name to Ray, Raymond and Ray. You know, a lot of folks changed their names and tried to assimilate. And the Muslim community that came acted as though there were no Muslims there. They acted like they were the first Muslims there to a large degree, and there's always exceptions. But on a communal level, I mean, to this day, the disrespect that African American Muslims experience with people who were born in other countries, or maybe even their parents were born in other countries, and not only Arab or South Asian, but I mean, it's also the truth in Minneapolis that African American people convert to Islam and try to say Assalamu alaikum to East African Muslims, and they might not even get their greetings returned. People won't marry their daughters to them. You know, it's a major problem. And I know that difference of experience is there and it's very real. But when I was talking to Rami, I didn't realize how much a reality that was for him. You know what I'm saying? That when we talk about Black American Islam and just Muslims, you know, that he didn't seem to be considering that, you know. And so he said something to the extent of like, you know, I always wish that he grew up having a sense of almost coveting the perspective and the path and the journey of white. He said, you know, I wish I could have born white. He said that. I wish I could have been born white because these guys, they get to eat bacon and do drugs and have sex and do all this stuff. And then they come and they say their shahada, and now they become a Muslim, and suddenly they're embraced and they're welcomed and they're loved. Whereas, you know, he basically, to me, it sounded like he was saying that as a kid that was born Muslim, if they go and make those mistakes, which most people do. I mean, most of our kids, most of our youth have times like that. And although like it's weird, like really for bacon, like is it bacon, that's what you want? But you know, and then to come back, people treat it like, rather than a victory that you came back, it's like an embarrassment that you left. So there is a sense, there is a particular and peculiar experience of Muslims who come from other countries to America, and especially their children, because the parents have this desire to have a better life, and the material life, the political life, of America, of the United States and Canada, but they also really want their children to hold on to Islam. And so there's a lot of pressure, and there's this feeling that I already am not being accepted by the kids at school, by the other American kids at school, and now I got my parents trying to get me to do all this stuff, and I feel like I can't live up to their expectations and things like that. So that's a very particular experience that he gives voice to that I think is really important, and especially if a person in that situation falls into despair. But it's also true that that for people who embraced Islam, and for even for folks who, like, their parents or their parents' parents, you got like entire generations, entire communities of multi-generational families. But it's basically like the family is like a converted family to Islam. that there's a very different experience, especially for Black American Muslims, and for them to not even be considered in the conversation. But then also, white Muslims that convert to Islam, they go through something. I mean, there's no denying the fact that, like I said, I've known these people that at some point in their life would just be a white girl, and they somehow learn about Islam, and they're like, oh my God, this is what I've always believed. And then you see a Jessica or a Michelle or something like that start to practice Islam. And they change the way they do everything, from the way they dress, the way they eat, the way they use the toilet, the way they, clean themselves, the way they, groom, the way that they, so many things change. And you see the struggles that they go through, and the ways that their families a lot of times disown them or ostracize them. I mean, for women in particular, and I've noticed this a lot with white ladies, when they start wearing a hijab, the way that the world treats them changes dramatically. And I've had a number of white sisters tell me, and I've just seen it happen in their lives. They're like, I went from being a white girl to being a Muslim, to being an other. I went from being, the center of the center of society to being an other when I put that hijab on. And for some of them, they married Muslim men, and some of them, their husband has another wife. Like they practice polygamy, which is not super common, but it does happen. And the woman is like, yeah, I'm working this out with my husband the same way everybody works stuff out with their husband. Like, yeah, that's not always easy. It might not be their favorite. Some people love it. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. There are women that love it, and especially when it's done properly. There's a lot of people that don't do it properly, but most people don't do most things properly. Most people have an intention and a desire to do good, and then their humanity and their intention have a little wrestling match with each other, and they do the best they can. But I've seen women that are just like, yeah, me and my husband are working it out, just like everybody and their husband is working it out. There's all kind of stuff that, like, yeah, we're always trying to figure out how to smooth it out, how to be better to each other, how to get what we want and give what the other one needs. And it's what marriage is. It's what community is. It's what being a human being is. It's what relationships are. But I've seen that as well, and there's a big thing there too. And so Rami's point also that it's not everyone's job to represent their community completely. And that is true, and that's an age-old conversation in Hollywood with marginalized groups coming into Hollywood. I mentioned earlier, I don't watch a lot of TV. One of the things that I watch all the time is The Sopranos, and you could judge me for that if you want to. But there's conversations that they put into the show where Dr. Melfi's ex-husband and his family, they really hate the portrayal of Italians as mobsters, as gangsters. And so David Chase wrote that into the show because it's such a community conversation for Italian Americans, that there are some people that they love the representation. And then, they also feel like, well, how come we're only on TV when we're gangsters? Like, why can't our stories be told in other ways? And so that's a conversation that's played out over and over and over again. And it's one of the things that people say, well, like, why is it my responsibility to represent my entire group? And that's a valid question, So talking through all these things with Rami, it was really good. And one of the things that I notice over and over again, and it's part of that disconnect between Muslims who came from traditionally Muslim lands and came to America, that disconnect with African American people, with Black Americans, and their experience and the wisdom that they've learned about the ugly side and the real gritty side and of what America really is, and what colonialism really is, and what modernity really is, and what white supremacy really is. just that disconnect and treating Black Americans like, well, there's nothing you could teach us. You know what I mean? If you come here, we'll teach you how to speak Arabic, and we could teach you the religion. But there's nothing for you to teach us. We don't need to learn anything from you. That's proven to be extremely unfortunate, because if there were to have been or to be that type of real connection, there's a lot that can be learned there, and so that's one of the things that I still do come back to, is just looking at the historical context and relationship that Hollywood, which is controlled by certain people, that as a community, as a culture, as an industry, the way that they've dealt with marginalized groups, oppressed groups, is like, if you're going to come into this space, you have to lower yourself. You can't come in your big, beautiful, regal self. You've got to lower yourself. And if you look at the history of Black representation, exploitation in film, in music, the way that it shows up in Hollywood, and the way that those images are used to perpetrate certain ideas and concepts and stereotypes. Because I'm not talking about European American people, but I'm talking about white supremacy. The idea of whiteness is based on, we are the standard and no one measures up to us. We're the best. And we're in control because of the fact that we're the best. And so you're either going to be ignored, or when you show up, you have to prove our premise. And so for Islam and for Muslim Americans to show up in that space and be seen as like, well, they don't take their religion seriously, and none of them really do it, and there's really no heroes in the show. You know what I mean? Nobody's good. Even the sheikh isn't good, and the women are portrayed a certain way. It's important to understand in the context of history where we're at, and like what things have come before us, and how do we fit in with that. And I say the same thing when I talk to white musicians, white artists, white MCs, white performers. Like, you got to know the archetypes that are there. There's Pat Boone. Pat Boone is an archetype, and Pat Boone is somebody that performs all this Black art as a corny, pretty white person, and acts as though it never existed before. And then you got Elvis, the bad boy. So Elvis is another archetype. And there are several different archetypes within that thing. And you got to have a sense for like, how do I stand up to what's come before? Who am I, and what am I performing, and what am I doing, and what impact am I having with relation to these archetypes and to the structure that I'm stepping into, And a lot of times when we're being rewarded by that industry, it's because we're being rewarded for giving them something that they want. I mean, think about the fact that Denzel Washington, he played all these really incredible, regal roles throughout his life. He played incredible roles. He played Malcolm X. He played, all sorts of great characters. I don't have them all in front of me. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, he played like war heroes and lawyers and all of these amazing, dignified, regal roles. And they didn't give him Best Actor award until very late in his career, when he did Training Day. The one time that he played a bad guy, the one time that he played an evil, violent, lying, manipulative, oversexed, crooked cop, degenerate gambler. Like, when he played a horrible character, they rewarded him for it. And it's a dope movie, don't get me wrong. My wife is a therapist. One of the main questions she asks is, why can't both things be true? And I think that really applies. That statement really applies to this conversation that I was having with Rami. Like, why can't both things be true? Yes, Rami And artists in general have the right to tell their truth. And yes, there's something important and humanizing about the truth that he's telling, because one of the things that's so important about art is it makes people know that they're not alone, especially in our society. In modern society, it's very isolating. It's designed to be really isolating. So people feel like they're alone, even though they're experiencing the things that are happening in mass, but people think that they are alone in the experiences they're having. So when someone comes along and expresses like, hey, I'm hurting and broken in the same way you are, it gives people hope. Because the first step is like, okay, well, at least I'm not some, random accident. Like, this is something that other people are experiencing. So it lets us know that I'm a whole person. And that can be true. And also the way that Muslims are, and the religion of Islam are being portrayed, Yeah, so there's a lot there. And what I come away with is I do love Rami, and I really love him. I really love him. And I believe him to be sincere. I also think that it's possible for sincere people to not realize the impact of being congratulated. I've seen it and I've experienced it myself. When we're being rewarded and congratulated for certain parts of what we do, almost every artist goes back and tries to replicate that and even turn it up. And so, when I watched the first season of the show, I saw him doing things that people do. You know what I'm saying? That people, he has sex with, outside of marriage during Ramadan. He's like looking for a Muslim girl to marry possibly, and he ends up having this weird kind of encounter and just all of this stuff. And there's, strip clubs and porn and that people experience all that. That's all real. It made sense to me. I'm like, okay, this is the show that I think, I didn't know he was describing this, but this makes sense. And then the second season is when there was the Sheikh, and I was really excited to see that story. And the way that it ended was deeply disappointing to me. It really was very deeply disappointing to me. But that's his artistic choice. By the time we get to the third season, I couldn't watch it. And it feels like it got further and further and further into like degeneracy. Is that the right word? To being degenerate? And further and further into shocking darkness and, So I think it's also good to know and just to be aware that that's a phenomenon that happens to people that do our art publicly. That when somebody is telling us good, when somebody gives us an award or some accolades or some props, not that we should shun that stuff, but we should be really aware. A lot of times, people who don't have our community's best interest at heart will give us awards, and they'll give us props, and they'll give us budgets, and they'll give us all this stuff because of the fact that what we're doing is serving them. And this is not a conspiracy theory. And I'm not saying that there's like this network. I'm not saying any of that. I'm not blaming any one particular community. I'm not talking about some Illuminati thing. I'm just saying that there are ideas that are held in American life, and they're supported by media. One of the things about America is that America is a war zone. America is an ongoing war. It's been that from the beginning. It's people who left Europe and came to somebody because they were being oppressed and they felt like they were being ruled by tyrants. And so they left and they went to a new place where there were already people there, and they committed genocide on those people. The First Nations people, the Native Americans, the Indians, different people call themselves different things, but we're talking about the original inhabitants of the Americas, the Tainos and, all of these beautiful groups of people that were living there. They went there and they committed genocide on them. So that is an act of war. And then all these treaties and all these, false treaties and swindling people into pushing them further and further and further off of the land, and then kidnapping them and putting their children in boarding schools and biological warfare and all this kind of stuff. This is not revisionist history. This is history. And it doesn't mean that that's every single white person. It doesn't mean it's every single American. It doesn't mean that, but in terms of what's happened from one group of people to another, that is the reality. That's the truth. And, then you have another group of people brought in as slaves, and slavery is a function of war. Slavery is a reality of war. Like, that's the way that people are brought in large numbers, especially into slavery and servitude, is by war. Yes, there were indentured servants that came from the British Empire, but that's a very different reality than slavery. So enslaved people, that's a function of war as well. And then even our political system is set up on people battling each other. It's set up on battle and on warfare. And so propaganda is absolutely a function of war. And the way that people are portrayed in music and in TV and in movies is actually absolutely a function of war. And a lot of these the media, when they were developed, they were used for war almost immediately. They were used for propaganda immediately. The radio, the television, motion pictures, records, the printing press, even these things are used for the purposes of war. And so it's good to be aware of that, and it's good to know that people who are part of the establishment, and that particular establishment, look at its history. I mean, it's been used in a lot of amazing ways. It's also been used as a propaganda machine from the very beginning, and it's not stopped. And what did it take for there to be characters in cinema that were powerful and that were regal and that were fully human and that didn't lower themselves, that could be excellent, that could be amazing? What did it take for there to be a Malcolm X movie? Because Spike Lee tried to make the Malcolm X movie and the studio wouldn't fully fund it. And so he had to go to black celebrities like Oprah and Bill Cosby and others, and they wrote checks so that he could make that film. And you look at independent black media, people like Melvin Van Peebles and others. I mean, this even Rudy Ray Moore and et cetera. But I mean, the things that they had to do, the things they had to endure. And there also is wisdom in that as well, that sometimes the first generations of people that go into that system, in order to be there, and even just be on the screen, they have to accept certain things. But I mean, we just lost Harry Belafonte before that, so many others. But I mean, Harry Belafonte has a lot to teach about that. Harry Belafonte had to fight. Sidney Poitier had to fight. Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee had to fight. There's a fight. And we need to know those things. And we need to at the very least, have those in our consciousness, that this is the way that people deal with us. So I'll say, for example, when Preacher Moss was on the show, Preacher Moss is the OG of the Muslim American comedians for everybody, including Dave Chappelle. And he's talked a lot about this. And he always says, go watch the film Bamboozled, because Bamboozled really is Spike Lee's way of showing Hollywood's relationship with black people specifically. And so he had bars. And so you look at somebody like a Preacher Moss should be consulted about these things. So that disconnect is something that's really real. And like my wife says, why can't both things be true? So there's truth to that. There's also great truth to the fact that people who are struggling and feel like they're not good enough and don't have the experience that we have. So I came from a community, and this kind of takes us into the Tone Trump episode. I come from that black Muslim community. I converted when I was 15 years old. I just celebrated my 30th anniversary of becoming a Muslim. And I went in there looking exactly like I look. I went in there being, as Dave Chappelle says, the whitest of the whites. And I was embraced from the very beginning. A woman named Arlene Elamine, who is a huge figure, a towering figure in the Muslim community in Minneapolis. She's the actual leader of the mosque community of Masjid An-Nur. Her son is the imam. But the truth is that she's the one that actually controls. And inshallah, we're going to have Arlene on the show, Miss Arlene Elamine. And she's like a mother figure to me, you know, and she hired me when I worked at the mosque. And I was a full-time employee at the mosque and one of the imams. And I mentioned Imam Ramadan, who was my first imam and teacher. He left the imam position. And so because of the fact I was one of the other imams, and also I was a full-time employee, in some ways I became the kind of like de facto person. I gave the first, we opened a new mosque and I helped to build it, and I gave the first lectures there. And I mean, nobody was saying, oh, we're gonna have this white brother give. It's just like, no, Brother Ali is you know what I mean? He gives good talks. People like his talks. People feel inspired when he talks. So I gave the first unofficial one and then the first official one when we opened it. And but our sister Arlene Elamine, she was there the first day that I went and I spoke, and she embraced me, and the community did in general. And the experience that I had and others like me is based on the message of Islam, because we didn't have a communal and a cultural kind of legacy. We had the message, the pure message of Islam. And so we're dealing with the religion and then also a very American, a very Black American cultural expression of Islam. You know, so for us, you hear me talk about it with Tone Trump. It's such a great transition into the Tone Trump episode, because we were challenged and continue to be challenged, loved, supported, critiqued, checked, fed, nurtured, taught, trained in this really dynamic, loving community that also has also has a lot of issues. You also hear about the fact that, you know, there are internal struggles and things like that. It's a whole human experience. But getting into that Tone Trump episode, that might be my favorite episode of the Travelers Podcast. It's hard to say. I have a lot that I really love. I love the Resmaa Menakem episode. I'm really happy about the Dr. Ebony episode, even though it's not one of the more popular ones. I really love the Vinnie Paz conversation. I love the Ant episodes. I love the Slug episodes. I'm so happy that Dr. Cornel West came on, and I'm really happy to talk to Ilhan Omar, even though just posting her, the people that disagree with her don't just disagree with her, they hate her. And it has a lot to do with the fact that she is a Black Muslim woman. But man, the hate that I get when I even just post a picture of her or a clip of her is so intense. It's really mind-boggling. And I mean, every time I post her, I lose followers, like noticeably. I will lose a noticeable amount of followers, which makes me just want to post her all the time. But I wasn't posting her because I agree with everything she said or done or all her politics. But as a human being, it's an amazing story. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm really grateful that she came on the podcast. And a number of other people. I mean, you know, Chuck D is Chuck D, and, you know, R.A. the Rugged Man. And like so many people have come on, man. Sa Rock, that episode is really dope. I think me and BK should do a 100th episode. We're almost at 80. So we get to 100 episodes, maybe we'll do a retrospective thing. But man, the Tony Blackman episode, incredible. The Zainab Ismail episode, incredible. You know what I'm saying? So many of these conversations that I'm so, you know, Maimouna Youssef, Adrienne Marie Brown, yeah, just incredible, really dope stuff. Anyway, so most of the people that have come on the show are people that I know pretty well. Like I have a relationship with them, and I asked them to come on the podcast. And in some ways, I didn't realize this until I talked to Tone Trump, But in some ways, I'm just kind of recreating conversations we've had before so that I can show them to you, so that they can be on the mic and so you can experience the person that I know. That's usually what I'm doing. And I didn't, like I said, didn't realize that till I had Tone Trump on, because me and Tone Trump had connected. Like, I knew him and I knew I liked him, but we got to know each other on the mic. And the bond between us, that's the bond that I've had over and over and over again with these black Muslim street men. And they are beautiful people. And the way that I relate to them is just everything. So it's beautiful. It's so incredible. And so the conversation that he and I had that is why I am the person I am. Conversations like that, friendships like that, bonds like that, connection like that. You know what I mean? I've never had a full conversation with this man. We're finishing each other's sentences. You know what I'm saying? We're crying and laughing, and it's I use the word beautiful a lot, but it is. And it's something that just makes me, it gives me a way of moving through life that encourages me, and it makes me know that we're going to be, like Kendrick says, we're going to be all right. It's going to be okay. You know what I mean? There are people in this world that are focused and that are beautiful and that are here for life. You know. So I'm really grateful for that episode. We talked about a lot of stuff, but one of the main things that we talked about is the fact that in our communities, we have these people, and I think there's more of them now. Like, there's always religious, I don't know if charlatan is necessarily the term, because I think a lot of the people that we're talking about, I don't think that they're just con artists. And I don't think that they come into it like, oh, I'm just going to pretend to be religious so I can manipulate people. I don't think that's what happens. I think but there are people that they have aspirations within the spiritual tradition. But also, like everybody, they also are human beings. And a lot of times, there are people that wanted to be artists. There's something about, I don't like the term failed artist, because a lot of times it's this weird kind of pecking order thing where it's like, well, I got more materially successful in my career outwardly than you, and so I'm a successful artist, you're a failed artist. I don't like that. I don't like that phrase, that terminology, and even just that framing. I think somebody is a successful artist who makes the art that they want to make, and that they bond with whoever it speaks to, whether it's on a large scale or a small scale. You know, I know a lot of people that they might not sell crazy records. Self Divine in Minneapolis doesn't sell a ton of records, but he makes the music that he wants to make. It is undeniably dope and powerful and true. And the people that listen to it are fed by it and changed by it. I mean, there are people that he's inspired to get into music. There are people that he's inspired to get into community organizing. There are people whose consciousness he's sparked. You know what I'm saying? To me, that is a profoundly successful artist, and I consider him to be more successful than people who sell bigger numbers and have awards and accolades and things like that, because a lot of those people are miserable. You know, and to me, a failed artist is somebody that gives up, a person that stops living in that kind of scary space of like exploring ourselves and expressing ourselves, or a person who just gets bitter. You know, they stop trying. They're not willing to do that. And a lot of artists aren't willing to make that kind of extended sacrifice, that extended terrifying leap to share ourselves and to really look at ourselves and to make music that people don't respond to, or put art into the world and people don't respond the way we want them to, or maybe it's not the people that we were hoping it would be. It's hard. It's very hard to do. But there's definitely a type of hurt and a type of pain and a type of a sense of entitlement, I think, of people who wish that they were being recognized and were being celebrated. And it's a desire for acceptance, which is a lot of what we talk about on these episodes, that we deserve and desire to be accepted and to be acknowledged and to be validated, because a human being is valid. You know, if you're here, it's because the unseen creator of it all brought you into being exactly as you are. That's what we believe. Exactly as you are, with all of your details. And the creator knew all of the endless, countless possibilities, the infinite ocean of possibilities of what you could have been, and brought you into being exactly as you are. So you're valid just based on that, you know, and you have something to offer. You know, but we have these people in our community that I think they start out sincere. And I think that there's something inside them that desires to be sincere, but also if that need for approval and acceptance isn't sorted out or isn't addressed in some kind of way, isn't reconciled, isn't settled, whether it means that you do something that settles it. You know, I feel like I had that desire very strong in me. You know, and anybody that was with me on tour, especially in the early days, it's like, this guy is relentless. And I saw somewhere where somebody was saying that people that are very successful, that do extraordinary things, usually if you look, you'll see some type of deep trauma in their childhood or in their history. You'll see that something profoundly painful happened to them that motivated them, and they wanted to prove to everybody, you know, that I am great and I am valuable and I do need to, you know, and there definitely is something to that. Absolutely, without a doubt. And so that needs to be sorted out in some kind of way. That needs to be settled. It needs to be rectified, you know. And for me, the touring that I did, the music that I put out, I think a lot of it also has to do with the people that I met along the way, some of the people that are on this podcast, being able to be friends with Chuck D and talk to him about the things that are happening in my career, and being able to talk to Pharoah Monch and, you know, others, and to go through it with Slug and Ant and Blueprint and Merce and, you know, others, to be able to talk through this stuff. You know, to me, I hope that settled that for me. But there was a time when I was an imam when I wanted the people to react when I was talking. If I was saying something funny, I wanted the jokes to land. If I was saying something profound, I wanted to hear it. If I was saying something moving, I wanted to see some tears. I was trying to rock the house. Like, I was trying to get that validation as a performer. And I'm happy that I got it. And so when I came into doing it in music, there's certain kind of like diva things that I knew about that I was like, I'm not going to be that. You know what I mean? I'm not doing that. But then I encountered people in the religious path that did a lot of that diva stuff. Like, they required certain treatment. You got to pick them up in a certain type of car, and you got to, you know, they're wearing expensive clothes, and you got to get them all the best of everything, you know. And there are diva imams and teachers and speakers and things. And so I think some of these people start out being sincere, but then, you know, they get caught up in the kind of fame. And there's a particular type of power that comes along with being famous for doing something good. And it's not just religion. The same is true in organizing. I saw it in the organizing world too, and activism, where you got these people that have been doing organizing work, activism work for a long time. And then here comes, you know, an energetic, young, pretty girl, pretty woman. And she comes through the door, and, you know, she hates the injustice in the world, and she wants to do something about it. And she's full of hope, and she's got dreams, you know, and she's got righteous anger and righteous sadness, and she has all this energy, but she doesn't know necessarily how to channel it, you know. And then she comes through the door, and she finds somebody who, because they've been doing it longer than her, they're just connected to all the language, and they have answers to all the questions, and they've got the communal wisdom of traveling and treading these paths, and they have connections, and they've got strategy, and they've got tools, and they've got language, and they look the part, and they've sacrificed, and and so these people will be open to them because, like, I want to change the world. That's coming from my soul. I want to change the world, and I have the right to want to change the world. It's a good thing to want to do that, and so I come wide open. And so the person that's here before me that already has access to this stuff, they are a key to helping me achieve the dreams that are going on inside of my life, inside my heart. And so that person has tremendous access on a heart level. And what are they going to do with that? You know what I'm saying? You're in a place that someone else enters into, and they don't know what you know. And they don't even know what level you're at, or whether or not you've actually done the stuff that you say you've done. Or if you really are who you present yourself to be. It kind of doesn't matter. You know how to give them that feeling, And I see it in music. I've seen it in activism, in organizing, and I've seen it in religion. And so me and Tone both were connected to people who came about through social media. These are the social media age. And there are like these influencer people that present themselves like teachers, like scholars, like sheikhs, just like every other field. I mean, my wife is a therapist, and there are a lot of people online, particularly on social media, who have not gone through training. They're not part of a network that holds them accountable. They haven't been licensed through any, type of body. And not that those things are everything. You know what I mean? Somebody can go through all of that and still be a horrible therapist. Somebody cannot do any of that and be a great therapist. But it's also true that when you have those external, when you have a license that you could lose, when you have training and a community that gives you not only the text but the context, and when there's a community that can hold you accountable, where in that community you want to have a good you want to have a good reputation, and you want to have good relationships. Those things are really important when it comes time to make hard decisions and nobody else is there about, am I going to take advantage of this situation? If somebody is providing therapy-like services on Instagram, and then they start dating the person that they're working with, what can be done about that? The person, somebody would have to try to expose them, and then it's a he said, she said type of situation. But there's no way to be accountable for that. You know what I mean? So what's to necessarily stop you other than your own righteousness? You know what I mean? And may we all be righteous in your own sincerity, and may we all be sincere. But those are the struggles that a human being has as part of the human condition. If you have access to something that's desirable, it's easy to start justifying stuff and playing games with ourselves, especially when nobody sees us. And that's why therapists that come through that community of being taught and trained, and they have a license that could be, that if you go complain to the license board, I was doing therapy and then this person, kissed me, or they propositioned me, or we started dating, or whatever. I mean, there's an investigation. There's a body that will investigate that. And a person knows that in the back of their mind when they engage. Like this, it's possible for me to lose it all if I'm unethical with this person. It's good. Human beings need to know that there are consequences for stepping outside the lines. Otherwise, it's too yummy. And some people, it's the people that hold themselves accountable are very, very rare. It doesn't mean you're a monster if you get a little off course in a situation like that. So, and the same is true with religion. There are people that are trained, and you go to a school or you go to an institution, and you have your teachers, and your teachers live with you and you live with other students, and there's a community of students, a community of teachers, a community of practitioners, you're expected to practice what you learn. You're expected to be transformed by it. And you have, peers and elders that are helping that be the case. And then you've got people that can verify you. Well, the whole thing about social media and becoming an influencer is to make it appear as though you're an authority. Like if you look at all of the ways, there are places that train you. Like literally, there are social media influencers who are famous for teaching other people how to be social media influencers. And that's all they're famous for. And it's like, well, how did you become a social media influencer? By teaching people how to be a social media influencer. There are people saying, come and take my course, I'll teach you how to make $1 million. Well, how did you make $1 million? By teaching other people how to make $1 million. I mean, this is like the world of social media. And one of the first things they tell you is you have to make yourself appear authoritative. You have to convince other people that you're an authority. So start looking the part, start talking the part, start presenting yourself. And the most important part of it is presentation. And if you look like these people all present themselves in a certain way, they really know how to look the part. And then also, they have a lot of like training and accolades and things like that look authentic if you don't know any better. So they're very careful about who they foster relationships with, and then they publicly document whatever connection that is. So, you might look at so-and-so person and you say, well, what are your qualifications? And like, what have you actually done? And then also people write their own bios. So, and they play around with certain language like study. So like this person has studied under some of the greatest teachers. Well, their study is of many different kinds. And I know that because I've learned a lot. I've been around a lot of really great scholars and I've learned a lot. But after being around people that really study, I would never use the word study. I got to actually double check my bios and make sure they don't say study. Now that I'm saying this, because I think I changed that. But I think mine did say study at one point, because, I would travel with them. I would read books with them, but that's a different thing than study. This kind of like religious tourism where you can go on these programs and you go and do retreats and you do intensives and things like that. You go somewhere for a month. My wife came to Turkey for a month and did an intensive study of Islam. And we may have said at some point my wife studied in Turkey, because it took a minute for me to really realize the difference between going somewhere and learning some stuff and actually being an official student of knowledge in the Islamic tradition. That's a very specific station, and it's a lifestyle. It's a lifelong commitment to the number one thing that this person does will be to learn in a scholarly way. So I'm not that, you know what I mean? I've learned a lot. I've been exposed to a lot. Alhamdulillah, I'm very grateful. And so there are times where I'll be talking about stuff and I might get a name wrong. Somebody actually just messaged me because I guess I told the same story twice and I mixed up. There's a story of Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl, these two uncles of the Prophet Muhammad that were his enemies. Abu Lahab is cursed in the Quran, and I believe it was his son who converted to Islam, Ikramah. And I told this story where the Prophet ﷺ says to him, I always knew your father had good in him. And it just really is a very touching story. But I lose track of the fact whether or not that was Abu Lahab's son or Abu Jahl's son. And I think I said it wrong on the podcast twice because one of the Muslim brothers messaged me, and I'm grateful for the way that he did it because he's like, hey, I think you may have misspoken, but since you've said this twice, I just want to mention it so that you can remember it so that when you tell the story again, you're not off, because the point of your story is correct. The point of your story is great. You know what I mean? Like that but I just want to make sure that you state it right. I'm like, man, that's a real student. And a real student memorizes things like that. A real student of the Islamic tradition, first of all, seeks to master the Arabic language, not just say the few terms that, so that we can give a lesson or a lecture about something and make it sound like we know what we're talking about. But to really be able to read a scholarly text written 700 years ago in classical Arabic, that's just the beginning. So a person, I did an Arabic intensive, and if somebody, and I've studied Arabic off and on for 30 years, you know what I mean? And so if somebody, a lot of my people, friends and listeners and things like that, we help them convert to Islam. And so I can teach people the very beginning basics of the Arabic language. And to them, they're like, man, Brother Ali knows Arabic. Not like a student, not like a student of knowledge, not like a real scholar. A scholar is going to not only be able to speak really fluently, but to be able to debate, to be able to listen, to be able to ask questions, to be able to listen to entire lectures. They have entire libraries full of classical Arabic texts that they can read, reference, and memorize. And then on top of that, they go through the requisite knowledge to memorize everything that they need to with regard to theology. They usually master one of the schools of jurisprudence. And then other things. They memorize lines of poetry. They memorize the dates and the events and the places and the people of the life of the Prophet Muhammad, early Islamic history, all those kind of things. These are scholars, But a lot of times we don't know the difference. And a lot of times we're people that get our content from social media. And so we want somebody that's going to look good to us and that's going to sound good to us. And they drop our cultural references. And so they make us feel seen, and they make us feel like, man, this is just for me. And also, a lot of times, they know that we have certain views and certain things that we want to hear. So like, maybe classically trained scholars of the Islamic tradition, there are certain things that are very real to us. So like maybe they don't understand, or they're not familiar with certain really important cultural points that are really important to us. And so they might not use certain language. They might say black slaves. Well, we don't like the term black slaves. We prefer people to say enslaved Africans, because we don't want the enslaved Africans, we don't want them to be defined as they're just a slave. That's a human being, you know what I mean, who was in the situation of being enslaved. So, if one teacher says, the black slaves, then they might say something amazing about them. But there's something in me that's going to be like, I don't like that language. That's not my favorite. You know what I mean? But then but the social media influencer is going to always say enslaved Africans. And there's something inside me that's going to perk up when I hear that. And then also if I like the clothes they're wearing, and if I like the way that they speak, and if they got hip hop references, and they're able to reference all kind of cool movies and stuff like that. And I don't say any of those things to say that there's anything necessarily wrong with them. But where we start to get into trouble is where we start to confuse. And really, whether they realize it or not, the social media kind of imams and speakers, they're confusing us on purpose, and they maybe don't even realize it. A lot of social media, a lot of media in general, there's a deceptive element to it. And so people don't even necessarily realize it. I was really close with somebody like this, maybe the best of them all. Like, there's a person who I spent a lot of time with, that was really good at this stuff. And like I said, I never would have done diva stuff as an artist, because I know very overtly, like, I'm not going to be the rapper that demands all this stuff. I'm not going to be that person, but this person that I was with that I really thought had studied, I really thought that they were an authority. And I learned later that no, they visited all these places and they knew all of these people, and they curated relationships with all these folks, and they took pictures with them, and they referenced them, and they talked about when me and so were studying in such and such place. And it's like, no, that person studied, and this guy went and visited them, and he got all the clothes, he got the mannerisms, he learned how to present that stuff to us who don't know any better. And this person, I was around them, and I was really deeply influenced. And so I started accepting all kind of VIP treatment. And I started spending money on how I looked, and there was a lot of the things that I picked up on. I was seduced by it. And so I'm speaking from experience, and then I had this really abrupt experience where I just learned that there was an entire side of this person that I knew nothing about because he had kept it from me. And this person isn't doing this work anymore. But there was an entire side of this stuff that I had no idea. That not only was it just more complicated and more messy, but it was in direct contradiction to what the message was. And there were people being abused. And when I say abused, I don't necessarily mean that they were being sexually abused. But when somebody feels like, I want to be close to God and I don't know how to do it, and then someone comes along and says, I can give you the tools and I'm the exemplar, and and it's very curated. I saw this person take a lot of money off people. I saw this person come between husbands and wives. I saw this person manipulate people and play with their emotions and other things that I just won't even mention. But it was really difficult. It was really hard. And, one of the things communally that really was even maybe more troubling than really discovering that we had this kind of phenomenon, this new kind of phenomenon from social media, was that there never was a communal conversation about this phenomenon. I'm not aware of there being one. And, so for example, me and Tone Trump, I'm getting into the weeds now. So, if this isn't interesting, then I'm sorry. You can always skip ahead or listen to an old episode or something. But me and Tone Trump talk about the fact that the Nation of Islam is a controversial movement in the Muslim world. Theologically, and some of the practices are unknown to global traditional Muslims. And so the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the leader of that movement. It was brought to him by somebody not from America. And, he led that movement from 1930 till 1975. Malcolm X was part of that movement. Minister Farrakhan was part of that movement. And Muhammad Ali and a number of other people. And then you had an offshoot of that movement called the 5 Percenters, the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths. And then also before the Nation of Islam, you had the Moorish Science Temple of America, and there are other groups as well. But the Nation of Islam is the main one. So in 1975, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's son, Wallace Muhammad, W. Deen Muhammad, became the leader of the community. Hundreds of thousands of people, both direct members, active members, but then also people who were connected in a less formal, less active ways. Hundreds of thousands of people. And Wallace Muhammad, W. Deen Muhammad, had studied global traditional Islam, and he brought that community. And so he said, there are certain things in the theology of my father's religion that are not true according to the sources of Islam and the global consensus of Muslims. And so he said, these things are untrue. And then there are certain practices that he said, I don't think these are good practices. So he changed them. He disbanded the FOI. He made a bunch of changes. These changes and his statements are very controversial. And so basically a large part of the community went with him. And then a large, including, Malcolm X was on that understanding of Islam when he died. And then also Muhammad Ali. So that's the community that I came into when I became Muslim. And I still consider that to be my community, even though the Imam, W. Deen Muhammad, passed away in 2008 or 9. And then I continued studying. And so now I have teachers in West Africa and all over the world. So, and then Minister Farrakhan basically led the people who didn't want to make that transition. And so in their understanding of things, they rebuilt the Nation of Islam. And so you have these two. And then now those two leaders in the two communities reunited at some point, maybe 2005 or 7. Forgive me, don't quote me on the dates, but around that time. And that was a really joyous time for people in my generation. Because in my generation, that happened in the 70s and 80s. We became Muslim in the 90s, and we love the Nation of Islam. And we consider them to be our family, and we consider them to be part of the Muslim family, even though we know we have theological differences, and it's fine for the most part. Now, in Philly, what Tone Trump experienced is something very different. And Philly's its own unique case. But in Minneapolis, it's like there's not a lot of Muslims until the Somali community came. And like I said, so in terms of like Black American Islam, and even the, melanemic people like me that are part of that community, we're all a family. And so the brothers and sisters from the Nation of Islam, they come to Juma and we go to their stuff, and we're all family. We know we have differences. Sometimes we have discussions or arguments or debates. Sometimes there's messy Facebook conversations, but it's all done within the context of a family. And that's where I'm at with it. But Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, Wallace D. Muhammad, when he became the leader, he started by saying, these teachings of my fathers, of Elijah Muhammad, are not in line with the Quran and with traditional Islam, and I'm saying they're untrue. And he also said these practices that we have and some of these institutions we have become corrupt, and we're no longer doing these things. Then he was criticized for it, and it was not pretty. He paid a lot of price for that, a lot of financial price, because he inherited the Nation of Islam and he was its leader. And he chose to live a very simple life. He chose to not live in the mansion and to have all of the stuff. And he basically said, stop sending your money to my office in Chicago. Your communities should be local. Your businesses should be local, things like that. Now, the other group is going to have a different narrative, and that's understandable, and that's cool. I'm sharing with you the one that I'm familiar with and the one that I believe to be true based on the experiences and relationships that I've had. So in any case, then after he said these things are untrue and these practices aren't good and made the changes and was very upfront about it, then Wallace D. Muhammad spent the next 25 years of his life, basically 30 years of his life in leadership, looking at what was good about the Nation of Islam. So after the first year or so of saying, God doesn't come in the form of a human being, and God is not black, and the white man is not the devil. White supremacy is a devilish idea, but a European American person is not a devil biologically, and there's nothing that maybe being saying things like that. The white man was not created on an island by a mad scientist, as stated in the Nation of Islam. All these things that he corrected from his perspective. But he spent the next period, the longer period of his life, saying, okay, but what's the metaphorical meaning in this for us? And what was the medicine? Because if that got us to the place that we were trying to go, there's something there. You know what I mean? And it's understanding the philosophy or the concepts or the truths that are kind of woven into what he considered to be myth. And he also praised the people, and because he was able to say, these are the things that I believe to be a problem. Let's acknowledge these problems, let's correct them, and then we can study why were they so effective though? And what can be learned from them, and to hold them in high esteem and regard. And this is what I wished, and maybe still wish and think could happen in the Muslim community around social media influencer people that, maybe they're poets or rappers or academics, and they haven't necessarily gone through that process of becoming true scholars, but they present themselves that way. And there are different degrees, and they're not all the same, And it's not to say that they're necessarily abusing people, but there's something that can be really dangerous in there, where we assume and we start to treat people like something that they're not, And the other part of that is that when social media influencers become the head of movements and organizations, that are also, so if the organization wants to grow or the community wants to grow in numbers and prestige and things like that, they start looking at social media influencers and saying, well, this person has a lot of power, because they're the ones that get the likes, the shares, the views. They're the ones that trigger the algorithm. They're the ones that, like, when this person rolls in, looking beautiful, speaking beautifully, smelling good, dropping all the right, things and saying the things people like to hear. Here comes a big crowd. They draw a crowd, and they can bring in the dollars. They can bring in the fundraising dollars. When it became really clear that this person, this powerful person, that there were a number of people saying that they had been spiritually, financially abused, that, when we spoke to the people who were in the organizations, were charged with leadership in the organizations, we found them very reluctant for the word to get out because of the fact that person, this individual, this influencer, that they were responsible for a lot of the prestige and the fundraising. And so if we ruin that, we ruin the power of the organization, because we lose our prestige and we lose a lot of our ability to raise money. And so then we don't look as good, because a lot of times the organizations actually want to be influential on social media as well. So you'll find them putting a lot of emphasis into media and content creation. And you find them really fine-tuning that, and it's not to say that everybody that's good a lot of people are good on social media, you know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them. And a lot of really authentic people are beautiful in that way. You know what I mean? So I mentioned like the Habib Omar, Habib Ali, Sheikh Mohammed al-Yaqubi. There's a number of people that you can mention that are really good. And there are people also from Ibn Taymiyyah's kind of descendants and Albani's descendants, that are also really good at that. I mean, Mufti Menk is great at that. Omar Suleiman is great. There's a lot of people that are really great at doing that. It doesn't mean that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. And that's what makes it tricky, But when the name of the game seems to be the presentation, and the presentation brings about prestige, it's like it's all of us. The community, the organization, the influencer themselves, it becomes about prestige. And I think so much of it has to do with social media, where we base so much of what we're doing based on how it looks to others and the attention it's garnering from others. When in reality, like when we go and visit our teachers in West Africa, that these social media influencers will take pictures with and they'll reference them. But you go visit them and they say, our path is about love and service. And you go to a fancy third space thing in America where there's a bunch of fundraising and there's a bunch of money being made and there's really fancy, expensive clothes and expensive oud being burned and things like that. And it's the best and most affluent of everything. It attracts affluent people, by the way. But then also, there's this feeling that we're doing all of this to impact the hearts of people. You got to be cool. You got to be powerful. You got to compete with the other stuff that's happening in media. And so you got to put down a strong presentation. This is what people react to, And they'll point to Malcolm X and say Malcolm X was cool and he dressed cool. Yeah, but that's not necessarily branding. You know what I mean? There's a deeper truth there. And Malcolm did know how to use the press. But what we see is that when we go to, there's this idea in these third spaces where, and it's not only third spaces. I'm not pointing out any particular person or any particular group, but there's this feeling that this is what it takes. All this prestigious, beautiful, expensive, next level stuff. This is what it takes to impact hearts. But then when you go and visit our teachers, you're sitting outside in a dirt courtyard on plastic chairs, drinking hand squeezed juice out of reused water bottles, not recycled, but like reused water bottles. You're eating with your hands out of a dish with a bunch of other people. Nothing is fancy about it. Nothing is affluent about it. But it's genuine love and genuine service. You're with people that would genuinely give you the shirt off their back, literally, that they want you to stay at their house. They want to give you their last bites of food. They have one animal, and if they find out that that's what you like maybe they milk that goat and they live off the milk, they'll slaughter that goat and they'll prepare it for you. You know what I mean? That's real love and service. And they're not doing it to get points on social media. They're not doing it because it's going to mean better fundraising later, because it's going to make great content. You know what I'm saying? So you start to realize that like you don't actually need this stuff. But and I mean, this same movement exists. This same idea exists. It's not only in Islam. I mean, it's across the board. You know what I mean? There are people that feel like, man, if I'm really going to make it as an artist, I got to wear this thing and I got to get my views up and okay, no. If you want to make it as an artist, you have to search your heart to find something and then figure out how to make art that touches other people's hearts. That's what it takes to be a successful artist. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people, I know I got friends that got, $80,000 chains and they got the cool car and they got the whatever. Those people are not more successful than Slug, who's wearing, or J. Cole. You know what I mean? Both of them dudes are getting on stage in hoop shorts and a t-shirt and some pulled up socks and nothing to do with any of that. Like they're making the music, put it in the music. Be sincere, and if you have something real to offer, then people will respond to it. You know what I'm saying? And if it's genuine, it won't matter if you're filling a stadium or if you're filling a basement. You know what I mean? It's really not. May we be sincere. May Allah make us and keep us sincere and grow us in sincerity. And the same is true you see it in Christianity too. I mean, this movement actually was really inspired by these like cool, like hip churches. It's a very similar kind of idea, and you get people that try to put a hip, cool spin on things, and there's just a danger involved there. And so people say, well, like, how do I know if I'm in one of these situations? I mean, it's tough. It's tough because it has so much to do with the gut. But in most people that get swindled, on some level, there was a gut thing that's like, well, maybe this isn't right, but you don't want to admit it to yourself. And so that's one of the major conversations that me and Tone Trump had, And there are people that don't like the fact that we talk about these things publicly. And I understand. I do. But also what I see with Imam Warithdin Muhammad, peace, Allah be well pleased with him and have mercy on him, shower him with good, that he told the truth about the things that he saw as being problems and made that well known. You know what I mean? So that's why I say our family in the Nation of Islam and in the 5% movement, they know that there's a difference in the theological language. They know there's a difference in the practice. And then there are people that are looking to bridge those gaps. Like my friend, my brother, Imam Sultan Rahman Muhammad is looking to bridge those gaps, and many in the Nation of Islam have the opinion that it's just really linguistic differences. And that's fine. That's an opinion, But so he was able to make those concerns known. And then going forward, people could make decisions about that. And in the Muslim community, especially, surrounding this phenomenon, we haven't had that conversation. I was looking one time, there was, I'm going to get some of these names, but I think it's called Standing Rock, and a man named Jack Kornfield, which is a Buddhist teacher and organization. And they had a young dude that was teaching meditation in their organization. If I have the names wrong, please forgive me, and please feel free to correct me in the comments. But they had a young dude, and don't say the names of the people. I'll erase the comment. If you say the names of people that have been accused of, I'm going to take those down because that's not what this platform is about. I'm talking on the level of ideas. I'm not here to call people out. I'm not here to cancel people. I'm not here for that. So they had a young teacher who was, he was cool. He had tattoos. He was like connected to skate culture and like indie rock and punk rock. And, he was very hip and he was teaching meditation. He was bringing it to a new generation of people. And they started getting these reports that he had abused his power and abused people that were his students. And so the way that they handled it, first of all, they were a licensing body that gave him a license. And what they did is they said, okay, we're going to appoint a committee to research this and to look into it. And so this committee sat with this teacher first, and they said, these are the things you've been accused of. We want you to know that we're going to investigate this. And do you have anything you want to say while we go into investigating this? And they talked to him about it. And then they spent the better part of a year, if I'm not mistaken, maybe longer. They put out a statement detailing this process, and it brought me to tears because I wish we had something like this. They detailed their investigation. They talked to the people who complained of mistreatment. They reviewed hours of his teaching. They talked to people around him, to peers, and they, to get a sense of where's this guy at. Then they talked to him again and said, these are our findings. Before we go public with this, what do you have to say about this? And they found him to be obstinate. He didn't accept any responsibility. He wasn't like, oh man, I need to listen to this. I need to pay attention to this. Maybe I need some peer review or something. He wasn't submitting to that at all, not even a little bit. And so they said, okay, so they met again, and then they came back to him again. And they said, okay, we talked to you in the beginning. You were able to hear the complaints against you. We did our investigation. You were able to hear our findings. And now this is the opinion that we've reached. You either don't know or don't care about the impact you're having on people. The first tenet of Buddhism is do no harm. You're doing harm, period. This is what we've discovered. You're doing harm. It's our opinion as a group, as a body, that you're doing harm in the name of Buddhist teaching. And so what we're going to suggest is that you stop teaching. But, and another tenet of Buddhism is radical transformation. So they say, we believe that you don't have to always be this way. And so we're inviting you to spend time really sitting with yourself and submitting to the process of, relearning and reorienting. And then if you do that, we'd be happy to reinstate you, but we're revoking your license. And so after telling him that, they made it public and they wrote a statement, and it was worded beautifully. It was signed by, I believe his name is Jack Kornfield, who's the head of I think it's called Standing Rock. And the names of the review board were there, and it was just a very detailed thing. And like I said, it brought me to tears because it's like, that's a community. One of the things that a community needs to really be a community is like, what do we do when somebody from within hurts people? And I've experienced that also in the music scene that I was part of. And this stuff happens in communities. People harm each other from within. And then what's our communal response? And if the answer is nothing, that's not going to be acceptable to some people, and especially for someone like Tone Trump. And that's where, so the person that I knew is no longer practicing. And so I didn't have to get to that point. So what I did, and I talked to my teachers about this, my teacher said, anybody that you know that knows you and loves you and trusts you, and you know them and you trust them, if they're in a position to be harmed by this person, then you should tell them and speak with them directly. And so I spent over a year breaking this heartbreaking news to people and sitting with them and walking them through the process of what it means. And it was heartbreaking and extremely heavy, and it hurt. It hurt. And I'm really fortunate that my wife is a therapist, because she was really helpful in that. And, she did some of it too. But people who you could see them kind of being pulled in, because the person didn't stop right away. The person didn't stop teaching and leading and conducting stuff right away. You could see people being pulled in, you know what I mean? And then we have to make the call of like, will this person hear us? Because once so with the Buddhists, in the Buddhist community, this person that they censured, they took away his license, they put out this public statement, he was obstinate, and then he kept teaching. And he was like, F these guys, man, and it became this like rebellious thing. Okay. And people still followed him. And like, okay, but now it's known. It's known, it's been thoroughly documented, it's been studied, it's known that somebody looked into this and this is what they found. And people who were in a community of accountability and where community practices were being upheld and standards, they had certain boundaries that like either, and they didn't even accuse him of like, this is what you are, you're an abuse. It's that either you don't know that you're harming people or you don't care that you're harming people. But the fact is you're harming people and you're not responding in a way that gives us confidence that you'll change these things that are harmful to people. So in either case, you know what I'm saying? It's like in Casino. It's one of the few movies that I'd be watching. But, the dude that's working the slot machines, like it hits 3 times. And so Ace, Robert De Niro's character, is like, either he's too stupid to recognize it or he's in on it. Either way, he's out. Either way, you're out. And, and that's basically what they did. Either you don't understand the harm you're causing, and you can't be clumsy like that and be a spiritual teacher and guide. You can't be that clumsy. You know what I'm saying? Either you don't understand, or you know and you don't care, or you're doing it intentionally in any case. So if people continue to study and to rock with this guy, it's known. It's well known. This is a warning from some sincere people that looked into it, And so this is a challenge that like is being faced across the board. This is like a human crisis. And it's like this in a lot of ways. I mean, you find people that are nutrition experts and people out here giving people diet plans, and you got people that only eating this and like taking all these and buying supplements and all types of stuff. I mean, that's part of what the internet is. There's a deep deceptive thing going on there. And it's also connected in a lot of ways to the propaganda machine that we were talking about with the entertainment industry. It basically means anybody can be in the entertainment industry. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So, that's the adhan. And I'm actually going to use this as an opportunity to wind this down and to close out. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. This has been a really great run on the podcast. And I'm very grateful to all the people that listen and that support, and there's a lot of ways to support. So we talk about joining the caravan. Look, this is a lot of work that goes into this. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. There's a lot of work that goes into doing this podcast. Like me and BK1, it's a huge chunk of our professional lives as adults with families that we put into this podcast. And the opportunity to grow it really would require to have more people and to grow our team. You know what I'm saying? So like people say like, oh yeah, we love the video episodes. We wish all the episodes were video. I do too. Or they're so much better when you're in person. I do too. Because we don't have a big team, like that costs a lot of money. And it also is extremely time consuming. It's just me and BK doing this podcast. Like we thank people that have contributed something along the way, but it's just me and BK doing this podcast. And anything else we do, we got to pay for. And a lot of times we pay more than we bring in on a per episode basis, like to hire somebody to go and really set up Ant's Place or to, do these things. So if you join that caravan, if everybody that listened to this podcast, when we started the caravan, we had 2,000 people that listened every week. And now we're at about 3,500 that listen no matter what. And then the number scales up if we have somebody really a great guest on. If the people that listen to this podcast would join the caravan and contribute in that way, we would have no problems. And we would be able to grow this thing, and we would be able to take it to another level. We'd be able to put more into making sure that it gets on the algorithm properly, making sure that, that there's enough content, making sure that, all the things that we have to do. If we could take those things off of our plate, we would be able to really increase what we're able to do. And this thing has a message. There's a message here, and there's an objective here with regard to the audience. And it's not the same as what I perceive to be the objective of other podcasts. Nothing against what any of them do. And I listen to them. I listen to them all. I dig them. I really do. And in some ways, I look up to a lot of the podcasters. Shout out to all of the really dope podcasters in hip hop and Islam and, all of them. But we have a very specific mission here to bring together human beings in a way that really reflects the common humanity of us all and seeks to really build understanding and love and to just water the seeds of goodness between us. And so the people that are part of the caravan, whether it's at the $5 level, and then we got people that do the $100 level, and it's dope. I love these people. They're so incredible. And I'm not just saying that because they support our work. You know what I mean? I traveled to DC and I stayed with one of them at his crib, and we've had people travel to Minneapolis, times that I was there. And some of them have converted to Islam with us. And other ones, we know their extended family. We've had people come to Istanbul to visit, you know what I'm saying? And I meet with them and kick it with them. We got people all the time that come to shows. And it's they're like fam, they come backstage. It's automatic, you automatically come backstage. Also, when we release new stuff, they just get it for free. I drop a new exclusive vinyl or whatever, the people in that top group, usually, I don't think that's happened with every single thing, but when we have our major releases, it's just hey, this is on the way. Or the learning series that we do, a lot of times we opt. It's not, you won't find it in the description because that's just a gift that we choose to give sometimes when we release stuff. But a lot of the times we'll just hook that up. So you can also support the podcast by liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, all that stuff, rating. Those things really help. So if we post something about it on social media, if you got something cool to say it. If you want to challenge me, challenge me. If you want to ask me something, ask me something. If you don't like something, you're free to tell me that. But if you made it all the way to the end of this, then you probably like it. But comment with fire emojis. You know what I'm saying? Comment with hearts. Those things show the algorithm robots that people are engaging this. This is actually speaking to people. And so they show it to more people, thinking, well, maybe it'll speak to more people. So comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Shout out to all of the people that listen to the podcast and give me feedback. Sheikh Jamal Diwan actually just hit me up. And my man, Mike Madsen, hits me up all the time. And of course, I mentioned Shane Atkinson and Imam Khalis Rashad. And there's a number of people that I mentioned, but I really appreciate it. Sage Francis listens. Shout out to Sage Francis. It really means a lot to me. And I'm very, very grateful to be able to do this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Travelers Podcast produced by Brendan Kelly, BK1. It is a production of Travelers Media. Much love. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.